minister not to know that you are working in the cabinet and contracts are awarded to the place you worked and your wife is handling it or so, it doesn't pass the smell test, right? At least at the minimum, it doesn't pass the smell test. So these are things that we don't normally address. Our society is sensitive to the issues of conflict of interest. So I'm not surprised that it's happening at the highest level of our governance, right? And this is the country that we're in. People appoint their friends, their girlfriends, their boyfriends, their wives, their spouses, their children into positions, and that will benefit them financially. Right. So the conflict of interest thing is very endemic in Nigeria.
Now, the argument they made in the case of Beta Edu, the argument was that Tunji Ojo was no longer running the company. In the case of the Chief Justice, the argument was that the brother was qualified. People who are defending Tinubu are saying that the son-in-law is well qualified to do the job. Why is it that people still don't get it? And how do we impact that knowledge to Nigerian society, where we know that executives send their driver to go and pick up their wife or pick up their children, drop their children off to school, something you can't do here?
Okay, so well, people don't. If Tunji Ojo is no more running the company, but it still stands to benefit financially from the company. That's what conflict of interest is about. You're going to benefit financially, or there's some benefit going to you because his wife and him, by law, would file one tax form. It's a family wealth, so he's still benefiting from that. So the conflict of interest is not whether he's running it or not. He's going to you are benefiting from it, and so are you supposed to use your position to benefit from it? So once you define it that way, it's not whether you are running it or not, but do you stand to gain from the decisions you make as a public officer or as a corporate officer? So there's an under.
Welcome. It's Mother's Day in America. Happy Mother's Day to every mother out there. Mother's Day are so important that a Jewish proverb says, because God could not be everywhere, so he made mothers. In times of hardship, difficulties, and war, mothers endure the challenges of surviving the human condition, often brought about by man's inhumanity to man. The world today is experiencing such a time with a threat of greater devastation in the air. There is the new India-Pakistan conflict and the old Russia-Ukraine war. In Africa, there are ongoing conflicts in the Congo, Sudan, Libya, and many other countries. In Nigeria, bombs are dropping in towns and villages. IDP camps are cropping up and spreading, and refugees are on the move in Benue, Plateau, Northeast, Northwest, and North Central. Even in Eastern Nigeria, where the last declared war took place, killings and insecurity are so rampant that people have deserted some towns and villages, as they did during the Nigerian Biafran War of 1967 to 1970. It is 5:30 p.m. in Accra, Ghana, 6:30 p.m. in Lagos, Nigeria, and 1:30 p.m. in New York City. Wherever you're joining us from, welcome to another episode of 90 Minutes Africa. My name is Rudolph Okonkwo. My co-host, Chido Onoma, is on assignment. In his latest book, Songs of Childhood, Biafra War Memories, our guest today, Professor Nimi Wariboko, bears witness to what he and his Kalabari people went through during the Biafra Nigeria War. As we mark the Biafra Remembrance Month, and use the opportunity to x-ray Nigeria's increasing descent into more profound despair and wider insecurity. We bring a voice from the South-South to revisit how the war affected them and the lessons learned. Professor Wariboko is the Walter G. Mulder Professor of Social Ethics and the Director of the African Studies Center at the Pardee School of Global Studies, Boston University. He is the author of over 45 books spanning multiple disciplines. As part of Biafra Memorial Month, Professor Wariboko will discuss his latest book, Songs of Childhood, Biafra War Memories, exploring how the memories of Biafra resonate in today's Nigeria as the nation continues to struggle. Please join me in welcoming to the show Professor Nimi Wariboko. Professor Wariboko, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Dr. Rudolph Okonkwo. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's an honor to have you back. Welcome. The last time we saw you, Biden was still president. Francis was still Pope. The world has changed so much. So let's start from the new Pope. I know you're a Christian and you may not be a Catholic, but you watch what happens in Rome or the Vatican City. What do you think about the new Pope?
I think it's a very good choice. The conclave made a choice that it felt it's good for the Catholic Church worldwide. So I would give to that. And a little bit about the history of this Pope. It shows that it's somebody who cares about the poor. It's somebody who cares about migrants and why they leave their society to go to other countries. So in that sense, it's going to bring that kind of sensitivity to human dignity, human worth, human flourishing, and for the poor to that office, if we are to rely on his pedigree. So I really applaud the choice made by the conclave.
There were issues that came up as the process was going on, and the choice being that he's an American, which is the first time people thought it wasn't possible. And then there was this other thing that he was has connection with Peru, where he served, and they trace his family history. They even got up to Haiti. So he is someone that represents more than just an American priest that is now going to lead a church of 1.4 billion. I wanted to address the issue that when he was in Peru, he was considered a different kind of Catholic priest. He believed in being a missionary, not just traditional priest. He believes in social justice, which is common with Catholic priests from Latin America. Does that show a sign that the Catholic Church will be going towards what they call the progressive wing, or do you think it's going to be conservative, going back to what it used to be before Francis?
First of all, just a minor point, he's not the first American Pope.
Oh.
He is the second American Pope.
Who was the first?
Francis is one. Because, you see, other parts of America complain that, like if somebody is saying, if Africa is not one country, so America is two continents, right? So if you're a Canadian or Brazilian, or Mexico, they keep saying, wait a minute, are we not Americans, right? So I've been made aware of it a long time ago that one should be very careful to ascribe the name American to only the United States, because Mexico is American, Brazil is American, Canada is American, right? So in that sense, is the second American Pope, But generally people use the word America to refer to the United States, but it's just like saying Nigeria is Africa. Nigeria is one of the countries in Africa. The same way, America is one of the countries in North American continent and one in the North and South American continent. So they all go by the name, just like Britain is Europeans, Spain, Portugal, they're Europeans. It's in that sense. But I understand why people say it's the first American Pope instead of the first Pope from the United States. So having said that, and I've seen the stories about his ancestry going back to Louisiana, the Creole, and stuff. So that doesn't surprise me because there is a lot of intermarriages or so. And I know in the United States, I have friends, white friends, who obviously are white, but in their privacy, they will tell you that they have African ancestry. Because America was a situation where there was a process called passing. There are people who have black ancestry would not talk about it so they can pass as white. So I'm not saying that's what his ancestors did, but so sometimes people in Nigeria or Africans are surprised. Oh, how could somebody look this way? And you are saying he has an African blood? Because in America it was 1/6, right? So 1/16. So if you have a drop of black blood, then you are black. It doesn't matter how you look, right? So in they used to do that, and it will take you 1/6. If you go, it will take you hundreds of years. Once you've mixed with black, if you like, look as white as you can. If they can show that that you are black, so people in Africa need to understand why Americans may even, if the story is true that he has those black ancestry, they will call him a black person, but obviously it doesn't look phenotypically black. So that's it. But it's if you look at what he's been doing when Francis was alive and Peru, he was a kind of bishop that was closer to the people. He cared about the people, not so much for the office. He cared about the people, and if you see some of the twists that he had before he became the Pope, he was in support of migration, kind of open borders, at least treating migrants with some kind of dignity and human worth, right? So he was that kind of person, and so people expect him to lean towards the side of Francis, but not to be a clone of Francis, because already the first mass he had, he didn't wear the typical red loafers, which Francis also did in his first mass after the day it was announced. He wore a black, just like Francis. So it's a pope that we expect to reject living in a very ostentatious, wealthy way. But how well is going to follow Francis' steps, we don't know at this time. But one could make a bet that it's not going to be a very conservative pope. It's going to be somewhere between Francis and the old conservatism. That is where we are expecting to be. And also another thing I said is also a very American pope in that sense, that he also has dual nationality. That he took up Peru. So Peru, the Peruvians also have, they can claim him as their pope, right? Just like America is United States of America is claiming him, they can also claim him. Just like today, any Nigerian African that is here becomes successful, well, America will claim the person, and their home country will claim. So there is nothing so unusual about him being called a Peruvian, because he has a Peruvian nationality or so, as much as he's also a member, a citizen of the United States of America.
Now, I'm talking about America and the government of America. There are already people who are saying that that the new pope is anti-Trump. He voted in the Republican primaries for many years, but when Trump became president, he stopped voting. That he's anti-MAGA, he's anti. You mentioned open border. They call it he's pro-open border, and they say things like that. So, how do you think that relationship would be? Do you envisage any kind of conflict, or do you think he will navigate it in a way that will make Trump happy?
Now, let me say one thing. the new Pope is not anti-Trump, and it's not anti-United States government. He's not anti-anybody. He's pro-Christ. He's pro-supporting the poor, just like Christ said, the least of these ones. If somebody says because he's following Christ and he's trying to be there for the least of these ones, as he said in his opening speech, he said, "I'm with you as Christian, and also you are your own bishop." So if people then interpret that to mean that he's against Trump or anti-MAGA, that is not this. He just living out Christianity in the way he understands it, in the way he interprets Christ. And so we should make that clear. And this is the same point that James Baldwin was making in the 60s. He said, when I criticize America, he said, I'm not anti-America because I love America and I want it to succeed. So when the Pope of Provost criticized anybody, he's not against that person. He's just standing for the common person, for that love of God that he said in his open speech address, that God loves everybody. So we should, it's not a question of binary, is for this or that, but he's just living out their faith. Sometimes what we ask people to do is to live out their faith in the best way that they understand it. Obviously, somebody who doesn't believe in those same principles of Christianity would think that you are against them, and they will quickly jump to that. In a world where if you are powerful and you stand up for the poor, the marginalized, the oppressed, and people see that as against government, and people don't see that as being on the side of Christ, then I think there is something wrong with the way we understand Christianity. Because Christ emphasized the least of these ones, that we should always have this kind of, as the Catholic Church have argued, a preferential option for the poor, not to be on the side of the oppressors and the powerful and people who run roughshod over the interests of the poor. So in that case, yeah, I resist using the word is anti-MAGA, is anti-Trump, or is anti-Nesbitt. It just is pro-Christ, is for Christ, and is with Christ.
Let's bring it home. During the burial of the last Pope, we got to see how he lived his life and how he didn't show any interest in the flamboyant possibilities as Pope. Will you think that church leaders in Nigeria learn something from that? Do they, even what you were talking about now a few minutes ago, about caring about the poor, social justice, do you think that African leaders in the church in Africa, they do that?
Unfortunately, no. But that doesn't mean that there is no one that does that. But speaking statistically, by and large, they don't do that. They're interested in accumulating wealth for themselves and their family. So they are not deep down interested in helping the poor. They're interested in building big cathedrals or so. So they're in a very different place. Having said that, that may also be because of the lack of structure that controls structures that control these churches. Probably that is why we have that. Remember, before the Catholic Church went to the era of the popes not having children or their priests not having children, or well, there was also the case of priests embezzling church money and doing all that. So they brought in structures, they brought in laws to control that. But apparently, African Christianity, especially of the Pentecostal type, have not reached that stage of accountability and control. And people still see the church as their personal freedom. And as long as they see the church as their personal freedom and they see themselves as kings and queens, then what do you expect? They are law unto themselves. They can decide the exception. The average African pastor, especially of the Pentecostal type, is not really a pastor. He's not really a bishop. He or she is a sovereign. And the German philosopher Carl Schmitt had a unique definition of who is a sovereign. He said a sovereign is the one who decides the exception. So they can make law, but they will say the law doesn't apply to them. So they take themselves to be above any law or any standard. So they're, in a sense, they are sovereign. That's why you have a denomination, and the head of the denomination will make a law that if you are 70, 75, 65, 80, every pastor should retire. But he or she has passed that age and doesn't retire. The only way you explain that bishop, that pastor, that overseer sees his as a sovereign who is above, because a sovereign is the one who decides the exception. So they decide the exception. They can say, I want to use church tithe for my personal stuff. It's okay. I want to use it to build a church. It's okay. No one is there to challenge them. So in a sense, they are not pastors. They are sovereign. But in the Catholic Church, the Pope is not a sovereign. He's subject, although he's the head, he's respected heavily, but he's subject to the rules and tradition of the Catholic Church.
We are looking at the new church, the new, what is it called? I don't know what it's called. Stadium built by, I think this is from Oedebo, the Winners Chapel that will be opened sometime this year.
Is it the Ark of God?
The Ark, yeah. I think it's the new structure, the Ark. Do you think that 2000, maybe, okay, let me be 2000, no, let's say 200 years from now, that it would be like the Vatican, that people would be going there, tourists would be going there to look at what he accomplished? Do you get a sense that that was what will happen?
Well, if that happens, that'll be great. There'll be any money for the country then. Tourist stuff, right? People will come in and fly to the country. It's going to boost the economy of the country as much as it can do. But that commentary itself is a sad one. First is that, well, it's not going to be like the Vatican, because the Vatican is part of an organized structure globally. But Pentecostalism is not given to that kind of organization. Also. So that is an issue. But if it's there and it becomes of historical value, sure, it will attract people. In the same way, if you go to Rhode Island, where the Rockefellers and the co used to have their great mansions, no one is living there. They go there, and people go to Rhode Island to see it. So it becomes a tourist attraction. Sure, it might do that, but will it become the Vatican? No, that era is past, where we had one Catholic church, and the word Catholic means global, worldwide, and then it began that way, and it has that historical significance. Now it might not become the Vatican, because I don't see Oedekpo Church eventually being organized like the way the Vatican is worldwide. So it's not going to be that. But we should also be careful. We have churches in Europe that got converted into other buildings, right? If the people move away from they might still be Christian, but who knows what comes after Pentecostalism? We've had Catholics, we have the Reformation and other things, right? Coming along the way. So who knows what is going to happen? But the other, I said, it's a sad commentary. The third part of what I'm going to say is this, right? Now, when the Vatican was built, the chapel, the St. Peter's Square,
Basilica.
Basilica, it's part of the things that provoked Martin Luther to have this, that money that should have been spent for the welfare of the poor was being spent on that building. And they come up with all sorts of schemes to collect money, indulgence or so. And that provoked a revolution, which led to the Protestant movement, right? The question is, once you open the door to say, will you become another Vatican or Basilica? Then the question is, will this also lead to people turning away or division of Oedegbo Church or even Pentecostalism? And they will see these kinds of building in the midst of extreme poverty as SSX or so. Will it also mark some kind of end or a start of a new phase of Christianity, just like the Basilica eventually became one of the reasons behind the start of Reformation, and you can trace all that change from Martin Luther down to Pentecostalism. So that's where we need to be careful. But I mean, I'll add just a fourth one, just for the fun of it, because Pentecostals always believe that Christ is coming soon. Christianity believe that. So what if Christ comes tomorrow? What happens to the building? I mean, so it also shows about how Pentecostalism have lost a sense of the eschatology, because now they are no more focused on Christ coming and what did they need to do to quickly win souls for Christ. They are now playing for the long run. Now you are talking about many years from now. That exactly, if it's going to be a tourist attraction, it also means that Christ has not come. So by that thought alone, it's a postponement or a disbelief in the fact that Christ is coming soon, which was the initial pillars or principle that drove the growth of Pentecostalism. But for the fact that we're not thinking that far, means that we are thinking less of Christ coming soon.
I know you have a long history with the Pentecostal establishment in Nigeria. I wanted to know, while you were talking, this thought came to me. Benson Idahosa, whatever happened to his church?
He's still, the church is there. It's led by his wife. He's still going on. I don't know much detail about it. I recently, Dr. Toan, he wrote a book on the woman and the gender issues there. The church is there, but was I expecting it to be a leading force after the death of the man? No. Or do I expect Pentecostalism to be a leading force about Christianity years from now if Christ tarries? No. Because there is this principle or historical practice in Christianity, which Andrew Walls shows that Christianity has a habit, through the power of the Holy Spirit, of living wherever it is hottest and appearing suddenly somewhere at the margins. And the margin eventually will become the new center. So Andrew Walls traced it this way. Christianity started in Jerusalem. It went to Antioch. It went to Rome. And you could see that. And then the hottest part was in the Britain, Ireland, all those places. And then it died down there. It popped up in America. America at some point was the hottest place for Christianity. Now we see it going down in America. I mean, America being the United States of America. And it's now happening in the Southern Hemisphere. The gravity of Christianity keep changing. But if you look at Islam, by and large, the original founding place of Islam, Saudi Arabia, that place, that is still very much a Muslim place. You can't say that about Israel today, about the Jews. In the same way, you go to Hindu, is still operating there. But Christianity has a way that when we think it is hottest and strongest in one location, the Holy Spirit has this habit, demonstrated over 2,000 years, of popping up in a new location. The margin to the center, the periphery to the center of Christianity eventually becomes the new center, and that new center will have this periphery. So you could see geographically and spatially that has played out for over 2,000 years. And denominationally, you could also see, even if you take United States for instance, when it started, it was the Puritans, right? Then from the Puritans, he moved to the what is called the Anglican and the Episcopal, right? This is the church to be. Then eventually it moved to the Methodists, that are the strongest, to the Baptists or so. So even denominationally, you see this trend happening. And we've also seen it in Nigeria. So that's why I believe, and I make the argument in my book, The Pentecostal Principle, that the Pentecostal principle is the capacity to begin, and it has nothing to do with Pentecostalism as a denomination, but it's to show the movement of history, the way to interpret history, to understand the movement of the Holy Spirit. So I believe that if Christ tarries, there will be a different movement that will not call itself Pentecostalism. Just like there was a different movement called Methodism, there was a different movement called Anglican, there was a movement called the Lutheran Church, there was a movement of the Catholic Church. So the whole point is that, yeah, it will become a relic of history. So even within nation, we see this power of God. So when Adausa was there, he was in the center or part of the center. But now we see people that were there before, the peripheries. Oyedepo at that time was at the periphery compared to Reverend Dausa, Bishop Dausa. But Oyedepo is there. See, if Oyedepo and Adeboye and all of them see themselves at the center, I'm telling them, by the logic of the Holy Spirit, maybe God is already grooming somebody at the periphery. And if Christ tarries, that person will be the center. But the moment that person begins to feel that he or she is the center and can speak for God or be a sovereign, the power of the Spirit of God will move, because God will always have somebody waiting at the periphery to do God's work.
Okay, before we go into politics in Nigeria, I just want you to touch a little bit on hereditary succession in the church, because something happened a few weeks ago where you mentioned that in periphery, where you were talking about Adeboye saying that somebody is too old to continue, and the person retired and he continued, while the person now started a new church. So I want you to, with your insight into what goes on within the Pentecostal environment, looking at Prophet T.B. Joshua. He died and the wife took over. Dahosa died and the wife took over. And there are many like that. And the churches, when they take over, there's no, in years to come, we see that they are going down in most cases, because the main person, just like you had at Cherubim and Seraphim. But what do you think is the issue with that hereditary, or when they hand it over to their family members, or succession plans that do not work, and what that will mean for these edifices that are being built by these churches if they follow the same pattern? What I mean is, if after the passing of the founder or the leader that made it popular, that the church will keep declining, what happens?
Anyway, yeah, thank you for the question. The person you are referring to is Oyedepo, not Adeboye.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I think Oyedepo, that's what I meant. Yeah,
yes.
I think, yeah.
Anyway, so the issue is that in most cases, Nigerian bishops or church leaders do not have succession plan. What they have is a family plan, right? A family insurance plan, or an empire plan for their family. So, and anybody who is in those churches and have not realized that should, as the Nigerian pigeons say, they should shine their eyes and look at. So, because the churches have not been institutionalized. Like you see the way the Catholic Church have procedures for doing things, right? it has not been institutionalized in a way that is seen as belonging to the body of Christ, belonging to all members. But these churches and their founders see them as their personal creation. In the same way, so in the same thing we are seeing with corporations. So it's a societal problem in Africa, in Nigeria, where if you are working for a corporation, it's going to be handed over to the son. There is no clear-cut hierarchy of this. So we have not really established managerial hierarchies in a way that there is clear succession, and that what is important for a corporation is the increase in shareholders' value. Right? So if a church does establish hierarchy, and what is important is the mission to win souls for Christ, to do the work of Christ, it is beyond one family need. But if churches are set up as a family venture, and the founders see it that way, then it's going to be a family business. And as long as the family can hold their things together, they will keep profiting from it. But a time will come, maybe when others will also say, "Why can't I go and start mine?" Because that's what we are seeing in the Ojukwu stuff, right? I would like to see the kind of constitution that was drawn up for this new church to say, is there a clear-cut way of passing on the power? Because people will experience one thing, protest against it, and exactly do the same thing. And there is no sense of accountability. And even here, American churches, yeah, they have structures, but there's some form of accountability to the government, because if you misuse public funds because you have a 501c, which is a legal umbrella for non-for-profit organization, then the government will investigate. But in Nigeria, in Africa, we don't have that in many countries. So people do what they want. So it's a personal business. There is no accountability. You cannot talk to anybody. And then their children will look down on the pastors working for the church, call them all sorts of names, as if they are working for their parents or for their daddies or so. So there is a problem. The church, just like the corporation, the mom and pop corporation, the individual single proprietorship corporation, that's what the churches are in a place like Nigeria. And so people are working for the families. But if the families begin to say, this thing is beyond me, is because of God, then look for the best hand that can run the place, set up the structure. If your son, your daughter emerges as the best, so be it, right? But create a system. The church is not yours. I've had cases, I don't know if it still occurs, like in some churches or house fellowship, you go to house fellowship with the pastor, and the people give money, offering. And a friend of mine told me that she was shocked that after the people are giving the offering and they put the money aside, then the pastor's wife dipped her hand into it and gave money to a person to go and buy bread. Right? But in the United States, you can't do that. You have to have the money, count it, record it, pay it into the bank, and use it accordingly. You can't just dip your hand and give money because, at least not to feed any member of the church. They needed to drink tea and some bread, just as I beg, go outside, go buy bread. And this person said she was shocked that she initially thought that the offering money was for God. So it's maybe somehow God. But then and then, the whole thing was demarked when she saw the pastor's wife put her hand and just gave a small girl, I better go outside and buy bread, make it shop for you. So when people have that kind of laxity, that kind of approach to the things of God, right, eventually people are going to wake up. And so a lot of people go into churches not because they really want to serve God. It's because there is no job, unemployment, right? And that is also something that is a little worrying, right? A good number of our best brains, because there is no job, they are going into churches, right? Now, I'm not saying the best of our children shouldn't go to be the priest. We need the best. But a situation where religion, whether Muslim, whether Islam, Christianity, has become the major source of employment, where you can easily deploy your skills. People who could have benefited the society more, could have benefited Christianity more, could have benefited Islam more, are now being diverted into Christianity. And that is a little worrisome. And I wish that the economy could improve, and then let the best that want to go to Christianity go into Christianity. The best that want to go into religion, go into religion. And the best that can be in the labs, in the sciences, to do that. But as far as the country right now is, people see churches as their personal operation, and there's no accountability. No one could question them, and they do what they want.
So many ways you went to this answer and so many questions, but we have to move on to politics. But I wanted to say, I read somewhere that the Redeemed Christian Church of God, there was a year they produced 10,000. They announced that they produced 10,000 pastors, new pastors.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have an idea how many people become pastors in Redeemed Christian Church every year? The numbers I saw was shocking.
Well, that number could be correct. Yeah, if you look at worldwide, yes. I don't have the right number, because generally with many things about Nigerian churches, their statistics are not easily available for us to see where they're ordaining, their membership, or the money they're collecting. That kind of transparency is not there. But I won't be surprised if they have 10,000, if they ordain 10,000 pastors a year.
All right, let's go to politics. You were just talking about the church and the structure, and I was thinking about the political arena, what goes on there. It's operating the same way. The president's son is like a king. He decides what happens, and has excess power more than even the vice president. But how do you evaluate the performance of Bola Tinubu as president of Nigeria? We are getting to the 2-year mark of his presidency. What is your take?
Well, one thing I would say, from what I hear from my position here in Boston, people are suffering. There's gnashing of teeth in Nigeria. People are suffering. So all we need to know, I don't care what kind of statistics they will come up or others bring up. The issue is that if you talk to people across the country, they are saying they are suffering, there is hunger. And they're not going to tell you they are better off today than what they were 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years ago. So that is all we need to know, that suffering, precarity of existence, and poverty have all increased. And that is the way. He may have a plan to say, well, a little suffering, maybe things will get better. He may have that, and he may have that kind of hope that things will get better. But I also know, as an economist, and as John Maynard Keynes said in the long run, we are all dead. So they may have a plan for long run. But if no one survives the short run, by the time the long run comes around, we're all dead, and it doesn't make there's no much benefit making plan for my grandchildren to survive while I and my children die. So the question is not that I'm against the long run, but we must begin to reiterate our thinking that there is no long run, either theoretically or practically. In a sense, there is no long run. Of course, you can say, oh, 5 years from now is long run. But the long run in the human life is always a series of short run. What if you have a 5-year plan or a 5-year way to get it? Then you're going to survive the 3 months today, the next 3 months today, the next 3 months, the next 6 months, the next one year, until you get to the 5. You cannot jump from 0 to 5. So if the long run is a series of short runs, as a leader, you need to ask yourself, yes, the long run is there. Maybe year 2030 or 2029 or 2027 is a long run. How will people survive? What is the short run experience of those people? Look, it is running an economy. Sometimes we should look at this as breathing. Just a human breathing, right? The day you are born, and at least from the look of your face, you are over 40 years, you've been breathing, right? I'm also that old. We are breathing. But remember, so somebody could say, 2 of us were bred for 40, 30, 50, 60 years, we've been breathing. So in the long run, we've been breathing. But remember, our breathing is always a short run. It's a series of short breaths that take us. For the fact that you can breathe for 60 years, if when you are 5 years old, somebody close your nose for 5 minutes, you will not live to see, or at least the person will be brain dead, you will not see your 20th birthday. So it's a series. Yeah, somebody can live for 100 years, but if you look at his or her life through the phenomenon of breathing, it's a series of short breaths. So leadership is sometimes should be akin to that. How do you take the people from A to B, B to C? You don't take people from A to D at once and tell them to believe in D. Yes, D is good. Stage D is good. Stage 4 from 1 is good. But how do you take them gradually? So I'm not saying they're not planning, but I'm saying I'm looking at the short run. And nothing seems to be happening to elevate the human flourishing of the average Nigerian.
Let me present to you the government position. They said people should be patient. They said that the economy will have collapsed if not for what they did. What did they do? They devalued the currency by floating it. They removed the subsidy. They said we were at the point where nothing, it was total collapse that we were looking at. How do you analyze that? You were once working at Wall Street.
Okay, so for the sake of argument, maybe they looked at services that we don't know, and they were part of the same APC government. They were part of that. Let's say so. So the economy was collapsing, and no person did anything for 8 years under Buhari. Let's even grant them that is correct. How you go about correcting that situation matters, right? So you are on a high sea, and you need to rebuild your ship. If you let it, the ship is going to collapse. Nothing. But you cannot completely dismantle your ship and rebuild it when you are in the middle of the high sea. So what is the skill of rebuilding your ship while you are still driving, while you are still sailing, while you are still going forward? So do you just take out planks or a sheet of metal and let it collapse? Or do you say, let me poison the people in the ship to make it lighter? So that is the skill. Well, if you are going to repair the sinking ship, the economy, the ship is made to carry the people. The people are not made to carry the ship forward. So the question is, no matter their starting point, if you make policy and people are suffering and you do not make adequate arrangement for their well-being while you repair the ship, that doesn't make you a great leader. I'm sorry. So grant them. But so at the end of the day, you've now come to see that people are suffering, what do you do to ameliorate that suffering? And what kind of personal sacrifices are you making, the officers under you, different parts of the government are making to assure the people that they should have patience? Why is always the issue of patience being preached for the poor man to the average? Why are the rich and the powerful not being asked to be patient with their corruption, patient with the haste with which they are taking money from the central post? Why is it that only the poor or the marginalized are asked to be patient, while the rich and the powerful are living very well? So that is the issue. To come back to what Jesus Christ said, he said, any policy we're making, we should care for the least among us, the less powerful, the marginalized, but that is not what they're doing. So, yeah, let's grant them that they have great economic tickets, but the bottom line is, are Nigerians better off today than what they were 8 years ago, 10 years ago, 3 years ago? But what are they doing to lessen the impact of their policy? That is the quarrel I have with them. If we have economic policies that are not focused on the people itself, on the welfare of the people, and economic policies that we do not care that the long run is a series of short run. Because in the long run, we are all dead. Kim said it. So let us make sure that the people are breathing. It was our president, current president, in his magnificent philosophic mind that said, let the poor breathe. The question is, this one is not question the poor are breathing. Some of them have stopped breathing for a very long time. And no one is telling Mr. President that the poor people are not breathing anymore, means that they are dead. I think somebody needs to tell him that.
All right, let me play a video of somebody you know, and after that we will come back and I'll give you a take on what he said.
Sometimes a weak king will come and the empire will even go, but then this empire continues to endure. So King Clark has done his best. It's left for us to believe in his own vision of life and his own philosophy. When my good friend Michael Zakome spoke, he talks about the issue of one-party states. And when you listen to the news, read the show, go through the show media, that's one thing that on occasion like this, probably one need to. Yes, one-party states, countries have managed one-party states. Yes, one-party state may not be an evil after all, because Julius Nyerere of Tanzania used one-party states to stabilize his country in their early days of independence. He felt that his country has, just like Nigeria, too many tribes and tongues, two principal religions, Christianity and Islam. If he allowed multi-parties, some parties would toe the lines of religion, some would toe the lines of tribes, and unity would be difficult. But it was properly planned, it was not by accident. If we must, as a nation, go one party, then it must be designed, must be planned by experts, and we know what we are going in for. But if we come through the back door by political manipulation, then we're heading to crisis. So I will advise that probably in a country like Nigeria, it's better we allow the system to stay as it is. Yes, the multi-party, but if we, for some reason, we must go one party, then it should not be an accident. It should not be by political manipulation. Because if you read this book, How Democracies Died by two American professors, then you see that some of these are the symptoms of the death of democracies in nations. And Nigeria is a complex country. And I think it's better we manage the situation as it is, that manipulating the system in a way that would suffocate the country to death. I thank God for this.
That was former President Goodluck Jonathan speaking at Edwin Clark's memorial, I believe. What do you make of what he was talking about? He was warning about one-party state, which is a new concern that people have in Nigeria, where everybody is joining the ruling party.
Yeah, thank you, and I'm happy to see my old friend, President Goodluck Jonathan. We're in University of Port Harcourt together. He was 3 years ahead of me. He was in year 4, I was in year 1, so I've known him that long. And yeah. So first of all, let me give him credit for boldly speaking out against what many people see as emerging one-party state in Nigeria. So I'll give him credit for that, and I think that it's a wrong move if we are going to have only one party, even though it's not been officially stated, but people are saying with the conversion, transfer of governors or team to the APC, we are moving towards that. So I like the spirit of his criticism that one party state is not good for the country. And I would say, I also affirm that it is not good for the country. But I would like to have two pushback. The idea that today they're holding up Julius Nyerere, that because he had one party, I don't think that's what the historical facts say. It did not just make a lot of sense. Julius Nyerere did it to show up his own power, and they can do all the narrative they say for the nation or so. No, so let us not go into there. Julius Nyerere is not the model of African leadership in that sense, because if you are really against one party state and you are for pluralism, whether Julius Nyerere did it or Tinubu did it, it is wrong. There's no question of let's properly design it. You cannot properly design your oppression. You cannot properly design your subjugation. I think that thinking is a dangerous thing. So suddenly, if we can call experts to do it, then it will be okay. Then it means fundamentally there is no belief in pluralism. That brings me to this second point. The Nigerian ruling class have never really supported pluralism in the way is being presented. They've never really supported it. Their knee-jerk reaction is always one-party system. Maybe Tinubu is just calling them out, and maybe making it is a great reveal, just like Trump is revealing things about America that's always been American. So Tinubu is revealing that to them, because whether you call it APC, PDP, NPP, or NCNC, or MPN, it's been one ruling class of the elite that have been looting this country, and they just divide themselves into factions. And this cross-carpeting has been going on for a long time, this conversion. So because at the higher level of Nigerian society, at the elite level, they don't care about each other's religion. They don't care about each other's tribe. They care about how they will come together to accumulate wealth. So access to state power is the most important means of production. And that's what they've always done. So at best, we've had one party for the ruling elites, and they can divide themselves into factions, and for the poor and the least white. So fundamentally, the Nigerian ruling class, since after independence, have never been for pluralism. Because how do you explain the rigging of election? You don't believe in the ability of the people, the plural masses of Nigeria, to vote the right person in. So they rig election. So election rigging is common to them. Manipulating INEC is common to them. Right? So, but until we begin to ask for genuine pluralism, and that genuine pluralism will also go hand in hand with genuine federalism, that people should be given authority. There is no reason why, if you believe in pluralism and federalism, that the oil money produced in the South or by the job people is being controlled at the federal level. And it's been that way for over 50, 60 years. So what are we talking about pluralism and federalism? Until we come to core. So what we have is intra-elite struggle, saying, okay, one person now wants to take everything together. But pluralism would mean that we pay respect to different groups, classes, religion or so, and we manage the country in that way. And we manage the country in that way that is not dominated by Yoruba, Hausa, or Igbo, but even the minorities are included. People, women are included, men are included. People. So that is the way. So I think that President Goodluck Jonathan is on the right track, but he needs to go further to say, how do we institutionalize pluralism and proper decentralization of power? You can't have pluralism when power is concentrated. The Nigerian presidency is too powerful. Part of pluralism is we should dismantle the nature of that office. The president can do, and as they say in Nigeria, he can do and undo. Right? So that is the issue. If you're going to have a debate, let's have a true debate about the place of pluralism as a principle, fundamental principle of governance in Nigeria, right? It's not a question of let's call experts to design one city-state. I'm sorry. That is against the principle of pluralism if we are going to do it. Now, we're under no circumstances, whether designed by experts or by angels, we are going to agree to say we should have one party say, who is going to pick the experts that are going to do it? I mean, so Tinubu can pick the experts, and then so if the experts come in with one party's statement, so the whole country should just agree to it. Why is Nigeria so afraid with dealing with its pluralism one way or the other? We're always trying to suppress pluralism. There are different groups with different ideas, different histories. How do we learn to manage that plurality for our own growth? Because this is a very dangerous tendency. And we also begin to see it in America here, where Trump and his party seems to be bent on having one definition for who an American is, how an American should look, how an American should do. And all these go against the idea of pluralism, the idea of democracy. Have we really has Nigeria really practiced democracy? Is democracy only about voting and the voting that people rig elections? So I don't really have democracy in that sense. So yeah, I like what President Goodluck have said, but I would like to push his ideas further to say, how do we really create a proper democratic, pluralistic, and federalist system in Nigeria for the benefit of every group and every individual in the country?
All right. Very good. We are going to take a break. When we come back, we talk about the work you do as a professor and the books that you've written. One of them is the one that really made me to think, which is this one. Where is it? Songs of Childhood, Biafran War Memories. So we are going to discuss that in the context of May, which is the Biafran Memorial Month. So let's take a break. We'll be right back. Thank you. All right, welcome back, everybody. We are having a wonderful conversation with Professor Nimi Wariboko. He is a professor at Boston University, and he is the author of several books. I counted 45. How many? Do you know how many books you've written?
I think that is about right. And then
how do you write 45 books? Amazing.
Well, it took me. My first book was published in '93, so that is about 32 years ago. So you work out the average. I've been busy. That's why I've not made money like a Nigerian politician. Because I'm pushing books instead of money.
It's amazing. So amongst all the books, this one is the one that blew me away. Songs of Childhood, Biafran War Memories. It's still, I'm still haunted by things I read there, and it was last night. You were 6 when the war started.
No, when it came to my
came to 1968.
68.
Okay,
when
it came to your, okay,
the war started. It came to
67.
I mean,
so yeah, okay, all right. So so this is a book of poetry, but it tells the story of your own experience in the war. We're used to reading books by combatants, people who participated, soldiers, you know. But looking at this war from the perspective of a child, it touched me, and it made me think about children in the Northeast, in the middle belt of Nigeria, in the IDP camps, who probably are going through similar things to what you went through. So we're going to have that conversation. I want you to start by telling us, I saw what you wrote at the end where you were talking about people that encouraged you to write a story. How did you deal with the trauma, which I recognized, of going through that all these years without putting it down?
Well, I went through the trauma, and I lived through that trauma every day. Because one thing I remember as a symptom of the trauma, before I went to the war, was in a refugee camp, survived bomb blasts, went without food as a child, see people being tortured, counting dead bodies as they float by the river. Abonma is an island. So before the war, we came back. Before the town was bombed, we went through the war, and we had to leave our town as refugees. And when we come back, I was in stammering. When I came back from the war, I could hardly talk. And so I still remember there's the whole house I grew up is still there. I still remember sitting in there looking at this blue sky or something. I just couldn't. And people say, "Oh yeah, you know, he doesn't talk. He's a child." And when I started basically to force myself to talk, as if every word wants to come out at the same time, and in their rush, they twist my tongue. So till today, I attribute my stammering, and people will notice I'm talking to you, that I stammer when I speak, and sometimes it's passable, endurable, sometimes it's not. And that is like a living memory of the war I went through. Remember, at that time, there is no way of taking you to therapies or finding out what was wrong. Came back from the war, hey, start school, school or so. It was, we came back, so 68, I was 6. After the war, we came back, the hurriedly opened school in 68, took me to a school, the first few weeks, and the teacher would ask me a question, and I knew the answer. At least I wasn't a dull shot, but I just couldn't answer. And so finally, my mother decided, no, the way to help me, so she brought me to another school where her cousin was the teacher and was a familiar environment. And so that began to help me. And it helped me so much because people forget, when we were in primary school in 1968, you go to school in primary 1 with slate, wooden slate, with chalk. So every day you go. But if you are brilliant, if you are shown to be brilliant, the teacher will promote you from using slate and chalk to using what they call 2B or 2C exercise book with pencil, right? So I quickly achieved that, and the same thing, and people begin to recognize I had something to offer in terms of brain power. So that was one way of dealing with it. You just deal with it, and the war is discussed. You go on with your life. You are just trying to survive as a kid, enjoying yourself, and as much as you can. But as I grew older, occasionally one will have those kinds of memories, right? So I remember I was in New York when 9/11 happened, and I wake up in the middle of the night, and I would see like planes coming at me. It was the same war situation. And so 9/11 so happened that I lived in New York when 9/11 happened, and I moved away from New York in 2007 for 6 years. You know, till today, I've not gone to visit that site. I've not gone back. I was in the city, I just couldn't do it. But I walked on Wall Street, and I know the building, the Twin Tower. The Friday before that Tuesday, in the evening, I was giving lectures to Wall Street executive and other people on security analysis or mergers and acquisition. But since then, I was in the city for 6 years after that, and now so many days, I've not still been able to go back to that city because I would dream about like seeing water and everything, and so one dealt with that. But you know, we didn't really have a term for trauma about dealing with this thing. You just say, okay, it's a bad dream. You just go out and you're pursuing how to put a band soup on your table, and you go on how to pass the next exam and how to survive in America. So he got through that kind of process. But about 10 years ago, I talked to Oke Ndibe and Tony Forel. I said, I would like to do a story on children of the war. Let them tell the story from their perspective, just as kids. Right? So, okay, and even General Effiong, the deputy to Ojukwu, his son agreed. A few people agreed, at least, so, and they began to submit their essays. But we're also looking for women to write because we didn't want to make it only boys who were there to give us that person. Not what adults told, but what you can remember. And we said it must be at least 6 years old to about 18 or so. That's what we define at childhood. But we couldn't get enough. We got a contract. An American press gave us a contract, but you couldn't execute it. So, but once I got into that project, I began to gradually think about it, keep notes or so. So it took years until finally I was in that point whether do I write it as an essay or poetic fun. Then before somebody said, instead of this debate, why don't you just get a tape and speak as much as you can, and then later come and sort it out. So that's what. So once I began to write, it just took me weeks or months to put that poetry book together because it's something I've been thinking, rehearsing, or so, and try to write it as I remember this as a 6-year-old, not putting today's spin on it, but how did I feel? And so even making myself to go to that stage was also a dangerous thing, right? Because if you have notes that you can go back, but trying to put yourself, say, how did you feel? What was it's like you have to regress to that point to be able to get. So I don't know how well I succeeded in getting into my 6-year-old body and brain to process that so that it will come out the way a child will see, the kind of questions that we ask, the kind of. So it was a very difficult exercise trying to go back to that stage with all the, because sometimes you don't know whether you will explode from it or are you invoking the demons or so. Do you still see the dead bodies that are floating on the river and the bomb blast where you survived, and the fact that the second time another day the plane came close, and people who have been in Biafra would tell you that the Nigerian planes that came, see, we were a minority, so we are bombed by both sides because they are trying to flush out Biafran troops, right? And the Biafran troops didn't really think that we, the Ijaws in that part, we are completely loyal. So we attacked to the Nigeria, and the plane will fly so low. That's why they came. They will fly so low. One time they want to bomb my house, and the house, when the plane is coming, the house will begin to shake. And so he ran out, and I looked. The guy was there, and the guy looked at me, and we exchanged wink. CCO, I can't forget that. He was putting. I know that. I thought headphone. Then I've not seen anybody in my shop putting that kind of something on the. Then we looked up, and the guy looked at me, left. 2 houses later, bombed the house, and I know the little girl that died, and I knew her mom. Right. So those experiences do come back, but the abiding mark of the war on me is this issue of stammering. It used to be very bad when I was in primary school. So now people say, like I've have improved a lot. So that is like, as St. Paul says, I bear upon my body the mark of the Lord Jesus Christ. Let no one trouble me. I bear upon my tongue, and indeed the whole of my being, the mark of the Nigerian Civil War. Let no one think about starting another war.
Wow. I read that poem, Mercenary War Pilot and a Boy, where you winked at the pilots, and you were saying that it was like a hawk coming down to pick up chicks on the ground.
Mhm.
And then as kids, we were making models of fighter jets. So many heartbreaking stories. There was a teacher that was arrested, the teacher at one refugee camp that was picked up because he was a thief. What really happened there? What did he steal?
Okay, so actually that was in Abonima. That's before we had this sack on June 21st, and we are moved out. So we are going was in the midst of the war. I mean, there was something also remarkable, right? In the midst of the war, the Nigerian government on both sides tried to keep some semblance of school going on, which is not, we can't even do anything, right? So we had Iyemoni's church is still there. So we had parents would take their little children before they go into Sari Primary 1. We are there, and like we are learning to read and write, because most of us, our parents couldn't read, and we are there. So I still remember the guy was teaching us. One day we were in the school. This teacher didn't show up, but soon we begin to hear noise outside the church building. Means that the teacher that told us we should not steal have stolen. So we came out. They roughed the guy up, and then school was dismissed because it's only one class school. No, it was not just for kids. And we went back home, and I think we didn't come back, and then the war actually caught up with us or so, and the war caught up with us in that sense. But that's 6-year-old. We are just told. I still remember the song, right? It was like you go home singing about it, and you don't know. But you understand the language. They said the teacher that told us not to steal has been caught stealing. So they roughed him up. But after the war, I saw the guy still in our town, walking around, and people have forgotten about that. But that's all. So all sorts of things were happening in the war. Like one day you have some respite, the next day there's a bomb, or the next day somebody has spied on you, or reported it to Biafra or to Nigeria, depending on who was in charge of the town. And something happened. Is like the war brought out both the good, the bad, and the ugly on the side of the Ijaws, the Biafran soldiers, whether they're Igbos or not, and on the Nigerian side. But on the Ijaw side, and the people in Abonima, the people in Calabari, what happens is that after the war, sometimes that is when the community went into the deepest level of bestiality and revenge. It was terrible, because after when the Nigerian side won, your neighbor that does not like you, your neighbor that did not like you during the war, will report you to the Nigerian soldiers and say you are a Biafra supporter. They will lead you out and shoot you by the river, or tie a piece of 18x9 block to your neck and push you into the river. And remember, those who were doing this and doing the killings were the indigenous of the town. The Igbos have left. The Biafra soldiers have left. So you see what war does? People now, the community was broken from inside out, and would begin to attack. It took time for that to settle down. So even when the war has technically moved away, we are no more a war front, a theater of war. People were reporting on their sisters, on their brothers. And the truth of the matter is that the community was divided by and large. There are people, the Calabari Ijaw people that supported Biafra, the others that supported the Nigerian cause. Maybe people will say there are more people that supported the Nigerian cause than the Biafra. But the town was very, sometimes your mother will support one, your auntie or your uncle. So, but it depends on which side win. And even during the war, when Biafran soldiers were in command in Calabari towns, you find a situation where somebody will also report you to the Biafran soldiers that you are a saboteur. That was the name that was used. He didn't support the Biafran. And the soldiers will punish you, torture you, or even even kill you. So you see this kind. That's why I say war is bad, because you see the worst of both sides and the good of both sides. So people went through that, but probably today people will tell the story as if the town was all pure Nigerians, or other town was all pure Biafra. It was not. Families were missed. Like one of the poems, the guy that came and woke us up at 5 o'clock to take us to spearhead the deal to move all of us out of our town into Igbo land, that we are going to lose our town. The guy that came to our house to take us wasn't an Igbo man. Was my mother's second cousin. so we still, but in the book, I decided not to use his name. I used Furo. Furo in Ijaw means from the same womb. So it's just a relation instead of using his name, because I didn't want to put any historical burden on his children, right? If they don't know the story, but the older ones know. But you see that kind of situation. So it was brother against brother, and it was a terrible thing to be. And as a child, you see this, but of course, as children, you have to play. So what? So because that was the first time I was seeing a plane in my life at the age of 6, right? Because hey, you live in Abonima, the airstrip was in Port Harcourt. You don't. Many people at that time probably have not seen plane, already. So so what do you do? You've seen photographs of plane in your school textbooks or that. So during the war, so after the first plane landed, some of the children have seen plane. So what do? We got clay and mold it. Then we also make images, or we have plastic images of Ojukwu. I still remember, very bearded stuff. And then we as children would take sides, just like in soccer, we take one side, the other side, and then we play. But because I came from the part of the town where my immediate family and my friends there were supporters of the federal troops living under Biafra occupation. Of course, we know how the elders talk about it. So Gowan will always win. We bought the clay, something, or the two plane, and the children will take cover, will do all the things that we do, and then Gowan will lose. If you go and play with another part of the town with different kids, they will play, and Ojukwu will win.
So this is how you wrote that part. Playing war. You wrote the war ends quickly. Ojukwu always loses. You can't complain. The adults tell us Ojukwu is the bad man. They say Biafra wants to kill us, bomb our island into the Atlantic Ocean. When I read this part, we are talking about the war is over. I didn't know you were talking about yourself. He said that the war went away with his word, and with the absence, his tongue twisted, then silence. It was really touching. I will ask you to read Memories of Girl and Boy at War. I know we didn't discuss this before. Memories of Girl and Boy at War. That was haunting when I got.
Yeah, let me. Do you have the at page 42?
Yes, when I got to that line, the last line, I was I felt what a 6-year-old went through in Biafra. So you can whenever you're ready, you can start.
Yeah, but to give you a background,
okay.
so this is a story about war, right? So the Biafran soldiers, and when people say Biafran soldiers, I don't want people to automatically think that they're all Igbos. The Biafran soldiers, sometimes it could be Ijaw people or Calabar people that supported Biafra. and sometimes they're Igbos, right? So that is the nature of Biafra. And also you have the Nigerian side that came into town. They could be Ijaw origin, Yoruba, Hausa, everybody was there. But the term used is when you grew up as an adult, you understand what they're talking about. The term used for raping girls, seizing girls, they didn't use the word rape, they say capture. If you talk to people who went through the women, they will say it was capture. So when you are as a child at the company announce that they've captured so and so, your cousin or you are so, and it doesn't listen. That's why the word that the adult used. Because when soldiers captured a girl, a young girl, and they take her to their barracks or their quarters, wherever they're staying, and keep her there overnight or so. Now you could fill up the imagination. But you as a child, probably 6-year-old, you don't know, you just say, oh, they captured, because of course sometimes they release those that they capture, the men. Sometimes they force them into the army. Sometimes we don't see them. Sometimes if the soldiers are traveling, they will travel with this girl. But as a child, he didn't really figure out what that capture meant. Because of course, when even they capture a guy, they'll say capture. But when you use it for girls, it was kind of a metaphor for the brutal rape of girls. So at that time, so thing happened. I was talking to a cousin like that. Okay, so let me read. I said, cousin, what should be done to the Biafran soldiers who captured you? I'm dead. Sister, what should be done to the Nigerian soldiers who captured you? I am dead. Why do you keep saying you are dead? I don't know. Do they hurt you? I can't say. How many of them were in the room? I didn't count. Why are you crying? I don't know. Grandma said you cut your wrist yesterday. I can't remember. How do you feel today? Sick. The elder said you should forget what happened to you. Impossible. How so? I am pregnant.
Wow.
Now let me tell you what is, if you, I don't know if it's the same way it occurs in Igbo. When I say I am dead, right? Now, I'm first, because we had this conversation in Calabar, right? I'm translating it. So in Calabar, when you are devastated, you just say, Afite, I'm dead. So because if somebody is reading, we say, why is a dead woman talking to me? She's not a ghost. She's dead. So when something completely overwhelms you, and that's one definition of trauma, an event that overwhelms the category, the ability, and the capability of your brain to process. You say you are dead. Say afite. So when something, the impossible happens to you, the unbearable happens to you, in the Ijaw language, in Calabar Ijaw language, you say afite, I'm dead. So when, till today, if you go to a place where people, maybe somebody has lost their important breadwinner, somebody very important or so, and you go to the woman or the man and you ask them what is happening, instead of, if they can't talk or to get you to understand the gravity of the burden on them, they will say, Afite, I'm dead. So that's why she keeps saying, I'm dead. I'm dead. Means that she's psychologically dead. Her soul is dead. Her future is dead. Her femininity is dead. Her nature is dead. She's been raped. So her womanhood is dead. So it's like, basically she's saying, I'm a dead person walking. Our world has collapsed. It's a different world now. And that's so if you understand a Ijaw language that way, that it keeps saying to you, and because I'm a little kid, but I understand what it means to say, I am pregnant. Because the elders are saying, forget about it. She said, How do you forget about something when you missed your period, right? You're going to. And I grew up, I know children, by the time I'm growing up, who were products of such rape. They still exist in our community. They answer the last name of their mother's father now. We know children that went through that. Their fathers were never found, or their fathers too died in the war. All that the mother knows is that, oh, that man was an Hausa man, was a Yoruba man, was an Igbo man. No clue, no way to find that. And some of those women too either died in pregnancy or the children died. But it was a traumatic moment, and that is what that conversation and I try as much as possible to go into that mood I was to get it and to be able to translate the Ijaw conversation, Ijaw language conversation, in a way that somebody will capture. That's why I keep saying I am there, because that's the way in the language you put something that overwhelms your history and everything.
Yeah, I wanted to say it's the same thing in Igbo.
Okay.
People say the same thing, I'm dead, when something beyond you is happening to you. Now, in War Survivor, you talked about minorities waiting for justice. What is justice for you? What will be justice?
What would be justice for me, at least, is in three parts. Bearing historical witness that something happened, which as a country we've not been able to do. We don't even teach history in a robust way in the country. We just, because we don't want to confront that part that people suffered, right? So part of justice is you can't bring back the dead, but those of us that are living, do we bear witness to the suffering of others? You see, so it happened. That is one. Generally, for everybody that was involved in the world, whether they're the Igbos, the other minorities in Rivers State, the Cross River, Akwa Ibom, and other parts of the country, do we bear witness to say people really went through this horrific thing? And how do we recognize that and deal with that and say it shouldn't happen? So that is one thing. And so that's generally for everybody. But for the Ijaw minorities or so, how do we make people believe that they also suffered and suffered tremendously? Because I've been giving talks on these interviews on radio or universities, and Nigerians who are even over 60 years old will say, we never knew that Ijaw suffered that. They thought the Eastern Nigeria was only Igbo. I said, no, Eastern Nigeria, very Igbo. There are other people there, and the minority suffered sometimes because both the Biafran side and the Nigerian side will attack them. And people just don't know. And oftentimes after the war, just like I told you, people continue suffering because the communities turned against themselves. Like they were gutted out, and therefore they begin to eat themselves. It was a cancer. A cancer is when a cell begins to eat other cells up in a cell. So that kind of recognition, and then probably that is not a question of people usually say, oh, we suffered more, you suffered more. So suffering is not something you put on a comparative basis because you can't feel other person's pain. You can only acknowledge that somebody had pain. But that feeling that it suffered. But at another level, like I hear the stories being told by my Igbo brothers and sisters. Most of them that even tell this story do not even acknowledge that the minority like Ijaw were part of the Eastern Nigeria and suffered the brutality of the war, and that recognition, and then finally the recognition that people are different in different parts of the country. Coming back to this issue of pluralism, how do you let people live their own culture identity while at the same time they connect with one another, not to suppress them? For instance, is it 2019 or 18, the former governor of Anambra State came in, the one before Soludo, he came in to give a lecture at BU, and I had facilitated that, and the iPod people came in to disrupt that he shouldn't have the lecture. Eventually, he didn't come into the hall to give the lecture. So myself and Oke were on the high table, and Lumumba, the Kenyan guy, and another woman from Anambra, a professor, so she was, we are there all on the high table. And then I learned that the iPod people had called Oke in the day earlier, and this woman, that they shouldn't be on that panel because iPod doesn't support the governor of Anambra's speaking. So when they came into the hall, the governor had not come. So myself and Oke and Lumumba and women, we are on the high table. And I asked them a simple question, the iPod guys. I said, you guys are declaring Biafra. And you guys says, I include River State in it, include Calabar in it. Now, but when it came to calling people not to deliver the lecture, you people didn't call me. But you know that this lecture is holding because I'm a professor at Boston University, and I facilitated it happening because some student association led by an Igbo student, graduate student, contacted me. If you people don't even bother to, if you think this Biafra thing for the whole Eastern Nigeria, he did not even bother to contact me. You handpicked the two Igbo people on the panel and called them behind not to come. But of course, they didn't listen to you, but they came. But to be one of the leaders said he's sorry for doing that. That some of the people that we are calling, they are not necessarily iPod leadership or anything, but that you got. And I said that is a problem, right? You are forcefully including my region in your Biafra map, the new Biafra you want to establish, but you are not recognizing that I'm different from you and that I need to be consulted. My people need to be consulted. But you see, that did not happen. So is that kind of justice means we cannot go back and wake up the dead. But how do you begin to recognize that pluralism and give people their respect and dignity? For instance, I even asked many people, ask them, where does the word Biafra come from? They think it's an Igbo word. Biafra is not an Igbo word. Most people don't even know that. It's in the book, right? I told you.
Yes. I wanted to get to that. That's
okay.
The first poem in the book. It's called Biaflo. It's a restless God. Can you explain what you were saying there? Because it was detailed and when it was long, but I felt he has gone through a lot of a transition. How Gowon changed the light of Biafra into. Give us the story of.
Okay, so there are many, of course, in Nigeria. By the time you come to my age, you are 60, right? You are older than maybe 80% of everybody alive in Nigeria because of our youthful population at the minimum. Now, many people don't realize that if you look at the Nigerian map, the body of water under that, the bulge of West Africa, that is close to the eastern Nigeria, is called Bight of Bonny. But when I was growing up and went to school, that if you look at old maps, what is called Bight of Bonny was called Bight of Biafra. Now, so once you get that, so that's where the name Biafra came, so the Igbo one. It was named, the republic was named after the body of water, just like people name Ogun State after either Ogun, the river, or their god. So it was named after Bight of Biafra. So that is the first thing to know. That's where the name comes from. It was an Igbo word. The question is, where did that word Biafra come from? It was given. That name was given. If you have old map, you can see it was Bight of Biafra. That name was given by the Portuguese, just like the way they named Lagos after Lagoon. So, according to the Ijaw oral tradition and the name, they came to the Ijaws, the the Calabaris, so who were living around that place. Where the Calabaris are today, it's not exactly where they are 400 years ago. They are closer to the ocean to where present-day Bonny is. So the body of what I call Bight of Biafra is a turbulent water, wind effect or so. So the locals experience a lot of boat capsize. A boat will capsize and they will lose people, right? So it had this reputation of a dangerous spot of the river. So they then mythologize or believe that that part of the river is troublesome and we're having losses there because there is a god that lives at the bottom of the river. And that god is always cooking. And therefore, once he needs human meat, just like when we constantly hunt for fish or animal to put in our soup, that god was always hunting for human beings to make meat. He's a king, he has to satisfy his guests, and therefore he takes human beings at his meat. Right? So because it was occurring often, they now say Biafra. So fulo, F-U-L-O, in Calabari, Ijaw means soup. The soup they used to eat about is soup. Bia, B-I-A, means undone, not yet done. So they felt that they named that god that his soup is always undone. So his soup is Bia flour, is always undone. And so when the Portuguese asked them, what do you call this place? They said Biafra. The Portuguese mispronounced it to be Biafra. You see the B-I-A is still there, but the flour, they pronounce it fra. So flour. So that's how the name came in. Now to give you a historical example and the way Ijaw named, most of the water bodies in Ijaw land are named after gods. Like my local government is called Akukutoro local government. So the river called Sombrairo River in our local language is called Akukutoro. But Akuku is a god. Toru is river. So it's the god. So the river is named after a god. So all the water bodies, because Ijaw has some kind of tripartite, depending on how you can. You have the spirit in the land and the spirit of the water, and there's a whole wall under the river with cities and street lights and everything. So there are people living there, and therefore they own the water body. So you name after them. But this issue of Europeans mispronouncing Ijaw names and forcing that on the people is also common. Like there's a town in Bayelsa called Brass. The people didn't call themselves Brass, they called themselves Tuon. When the Portuguese, this was British, when they arrived at the coast, they now got out of their boat and they grabbed people by their hand. Say, what is the name of this town? Look at the insolence. You are speaking your language, you expect that they will understand it. They grab them by the hand. Say, what is the name of this town? And the people will say, let go of my hand. And in Nembe dialect of Ijaw, it means Brasien. Let go of my hand. Brasien. Brasien. They reach the second person. What is the name of your town? They will do the same thing, grab them by the hand. What is it? And they say, Brasien. So now the white men thought, they're answering our question, and their name is Brass. My town is called Abonima. It was named wrongly called. We call ourselves Inye Money. They were mispronouncing the town next to us, Obonima, and they say we are Bonima. So now people don't understand this kind of historical stuff, right? But the fun I was having with the poem is that the poem says the God that is there is difficult to satisfy him. Now, in the typical African sense of religiosity, spirituality, I was playing with that. Like, now you took that name and you named it to a new republic, Ojukwu, and according to some story, when they were having the meetings when they are looking for names in the meeting, according to some version of that meeting that I had, it was an Ijaw man. They were looking for other names, other Igbo social names. There was an Ijaw man that says, why are we looking for a name? Name the Bight of Biafra, because the water Biafra, kind of is underneath eastern Nigeria. So everybody know it. It won't look any ethnic or Igbo or so. So that's one reason they picked that name, according to some version of the story. I've not seen an official account for it, but I've heard that version. Right? So now the Jaws have a god that they felt was a restless god that was always consuming human beings. So restlessness is part of it. Now he took that god. By the time Ojukwu came to be the chief high priest of that god, now it has become a land god. From sea, it has become a land god. But the restlessness is still there. So it's I want to point people to that as a play, poetic play to say, we have not still handled the restlessness of Nigeria. The soul of Biafra or Biafra has not laid to rest. So that's why you have Nnamdi Kanu. The question is, how do we as a country come to deal with this soul of what Biafra represents, of what Biafra represents? Because remember, whether the people knew actually there was a god under the river and there was cooking is not the point. They were expressing a particular form of trauma. They're losing their children, their wealth to drowning or so. But they named it that to recognize their pain, what they were dealing with. In today's, so Biafra too represent a pain and a trauma that we've not come to master or to control or to govern well. And I wanted people to see the two stories in that sense of continuity. And that there are cases where there's more that join us than separate us. Most people, even the very name that today young Igbo men and women are fighting over, willing to die, was actually an Ijaw stuff. And Ijaws and Igbos has been neighbors, and we've been trading, connecting a long time. So that story also speaks to the fact that these are communities that have been in contact, trading, and doing well for a very long time. How do we recreate that sense of connection and brotherhood and that sense for common flourishing? That is what that story is also trying. That historically there is more that connect us than separate us.
All right. We have people who are willing. They are in the studio. They want to interact with you. But before I bring them on, I just wanted to ask you. You mentioned 20 pounds, the money that was given to people after the war. Did the Kalabari people also receive 20 pounds no matter how much they had in the bank? Or is it just people from...
Yeah, I think it was mainly the Igbos. And people don't talk about it, right? So they come after the war, if you had the Biafra money, of course, we're only giving 20 pounds. It was a policy made by Gowon and his cabinet about that. That impoverished a lot of Biafran holders. And so if that policy hold, there are also the Jaws who are on Biafra, who are the Biafra. So they too would have lost that money. But that is something that we are also not addressing. We don't even want to acknowledge that money, currency was used as a weapon of warfare. Food was also used as a weapon of warfare. So the blockade that didn't bring food not only affected Igbos in today's southeastern Nigeria, also affected those of us in the Ijaw area. Like one of the poems says, we were so hungry that we cut down pawpaw or ripe pawpaw, pretend it's yam, and cook it and eat. One of my cousins, who was forced into the Biafran side as a youth soldier, when he came back, until today, it doesn't seem to be 100% okay in my assessment. He said sometimes they were so hungry that they would cook leather shoes, boil it enough so that it would turn back to kanda, That's what he told me. And as a maybe I don't know if that's true, but as a child, he told me that it stayed in my head. They would then begin to chew on the leather shoe that has been cooked to get it back to, it will look like very hard kanda. People went through suffering. But as a country, we have not acknowledged that. I'm not talking about who caused the war or who didn't cause the war or so, but we need to face the fact that people suffered. And how do we recognize them? And how do we tell the story in a way that not only acknowledges our pain, but also acknowledges the pain of the others? And that's why in this book, as a child, I did not paint any one group as the demon or the angel. And so even going to the extent of talking about that 20 pound, because it was talked about in the town, was sort of to say, look, the war continued in different ways even after the war, and that people suffered. And I just wanted to acknowledge it, and I expect that every Nigerian will acknowledge the depth of what that war did. That thousands and even millions of people died.
All right. They will kill me if I don't step out and let them in. But thank you so much for this book. It's really something I would recommend that everybody who cares to know the other side of the story should get and read. We had Wemaban on this show, and he actually touched on some of the angles of the story that we may not have known. Let me bring in people who are waiting. Or do you need a break? Let me see. Do you need a break?
No, I'm fine.
Okay. All right. So let me bring in people who are here, and then we can start the conversation. Maybe in another 15 minutes, we can take a break. Yeah. So please, if I call on you, just ask your question, and we can start from there. If we have opportunity for second round of questioning, we will get to that. So let me start with you. I think you're the first person to come. Saki, hold on, let me get this out of our way so that we can see everybody. Oh, where is he? Saki? I can see you down there, but I can't get. Saki, can you hear me?
I can see his name there.
Yeah, we can see your name, but we can't see you. Are you frozen? Saki? All right, he's not. He can't hear us. KJ, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Dr. Damages. Prof, it's good to see you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Totally enjoyed listening to you. I'll have several questions, but I'm not going to ask all of them. And I'm not going to even attempt to ask them. Some I agree with you, especially with the church in Nigeria. The place of differ a little bit. You are paying too much attention to those who have turned the church as an industry. There are still other people whose churches are not, so they don't have that hierarchy which you painted, which is, I totally agree with you. The earlier we deal with that, the better. And then, of course, there's no need to even build those cathedrals. If we don't turn them to industries, Nigeria would have been better off for it. Because just like you concluded, or like we all think, the next dispensation, those things may not be useful. Again, the other place, I listened to your Biafran story. Fortunately for me, my elder brother was about your age, my most elder brother, when the war started. And I hear these things, I hear his pains, and when I listen to you, those things come back to me, and it still makes me, feel very sad. There's a primary school in Ojukwu, where they gather the little children around, and without shirts and all that, they go to beg for food. They call it rations and all that. And the pictures that they have is mind breaking. Well, I don't want to get into the emotional part. The other thing I want to say is I agree with your assertion of the Biafra as a name you have interpreted. But I also want to tell that Biafra, Bia is in Igbo language. Afara is a tree in Igbo land. So Biafra is the same thing for which the Igbos can equally claim, lay claim to. unfortunately, you are a prof, so it's difficult to argue with a prof. You have read more books than I have. So obviously, I'm just trying to, tread softly here. But you know that languages over time change, their meanings, kind of, generations after generations seem to either lose more meaning to a word or create more meaning into that word, and so it either loses value or gain more, into that same word. And I think you understand what I'm saying. So, in the case of Biafra, we who are the victims, my father became poor after the war, and he never regained till he passed to be with the Lord. But we will not be able to, live most of what we have experienced, and it will not be the same thing with the people of Ijaw and the rest people. And I understand that a lot of the Ijaws fought on the side of the Biafra, just like some Igbos fought on the side of Nigeria. Even though after the war, those who fought on the side of Nigeria still got the same treatment with the Igbos who fought on behalf of Biafra. Now, a question. All right, that is where I'm anchoring my contribution here. The Ijaws of this time, from where you come, don't even think that even part of the East at all. Don't even think that there's anything that have Biafran struggle that you are part of. So it becomes difficult for you to say they should now be included, because each time we have a meeting or a discussion on the way forward Biafra as it is now, led by Nnamdi Kanu, they don't want to hear anything about it, and they clearly want to distinguish or they remove themselves. What do I say now? Separate themselves from this, making it impossible for you to even try to bring them in, because they tell you, please don't put us in. We have never been and will not be. So it's kind of relieving when I hear you say, no, there's some part of Ijaws were in this side, even though forcefully, or on the other side. I want to thank you. It's been a very good discussion, and I hope you stay more, give us an insight. Thank you so much. That's my little contribution.
Yeah. Okay. So let me give you my take. Well, the Jaws, a good number of them are in River State and Bayelsa. You have them in Delta, Ondo, right? So not all of them were part of it. The bulk is in Rivers and Bayelsa, the former Eastern Nigeria. But you have a Jaws in Ondo, and you have a Jaws in Delta, right? So it's spread, and maybe it's one or two other part of Nigeria. But so there's a way to go about this way. Because they had certain experiences in Eastern Nigeria before the war started. They were not that there were no successful Ijaw people in Eastern Nigeria who benefited from the government, but by and large, the historical experience that they had was that they were discriminated against as minorities. And so they had that experience going with them in the Eastern Nigeria. And if somebody doubts it, read Achebe's book, is it The Trouble with Nigeria? So, where he clearly stated, he acknowledged this treatment of the majority Igbo against the minorities in the Eastern Nigeria. That same thing happened in Yoruba land versus why the mid-western region have to be carved out. The same thing you find in the north about the Benue and Taka wanted to go around. So the politics we have to go back to what our parents and ancestors did. The politics of that era discriminated against the minorities. And Achebe said it. He said, Achebe said the East was going for him, that it was Professor Ayota, an ethnic man, who was supposed to be the premier of Eastern Nigeria, not Nnamdi Azikiwe. Nnamdi Azikiwe was in the West. So when Awo and that cross-carpeting took him out, he came down to the East, and then they have to, because he's from the majority group, he has to engineer and they remove Professor Ayota. Actually, said it clearly. He said, when you do that, you create a problem that they were going. So they felt that they were not treated right. And that is part of the acknowledgement to say, in the same way, maybe people in the mid belt area of Nigeria may also feel the same way about the Hausa Fulani hegemony, maybe in a different way. So, but in our generation, we need to acknowledge that, because when people have wounds and we don't acknowledge them in any way and think it didn't happen, they pass this trauma and the story to their children, to their parents. So, and I expected, in many ways, like I felt somebody like Odili was well placed to rebuild something in the eastern Nigeria, because for some reason it's in River State, but clearly of Igbo origin, and through the support of other Ijaws, and so he became governor of River State. And so he had the trust of the Ijaws, and he had the trust of the Igbos. I felt he should have used that position to rebuild. Until today, I have a lot of Igbo friends, and I talk to them. I say, look, part of the onus of building the former Eastern Nigeria, or greater part of it, lies with the Igbos. Whatever happened, we need, because you see, other regions have been able to work with their minorities and go. So if we want to produce an Igbo presidency, the struggle should not just be for Southeastern. How do you, at least these people that have historical affinity with you, how do you begin to mobilize them and acknowledge the ills done on both sides? What our parents did, that is a generation they've got. How do you begin to rebuild so that we can rebuild that confidence? The Igbos need the minorities of the Eastern, and the Eastern minorities also need them for the sake of Nigerian politics, right? And that is, for me, where I stand. But this issue that I don't want to compare who suffered most of it. The task before us is that how do we rebuild that sense of that we are one region? Before the war, according to statistics, Eastern Nigeria was about the fastest growing economy in Africa or other places, right? We have lost that. We are not understanding that. The way the current Nigerian politics or things are arranged, the people in the East and the South do not understand. Let me give you one example. How do we run a country where the functioning ports are all in one part of the country? And so we in the East have to import something and drive it, and no one is talking about it and not seeing it as a strategic venture for the former Eastern. How do we run? We had our son being the Minister of Transportation, couldn't make it happen. So until people begin to see beyond their ethnicity and says, if we want to develop federalism, yes, we develop our own pockets, but we also have to develop regions so that regions become surviving and strong economies of their own. But that will mean that people come together. And just remember, whether you like it or not, if you are with minority, if you are the big guys anywhere in the world, the minorities will be afraid of you. So it's not for you as a big guy to say, you know what, how do I make everybody feel at home? And how do I rebuild things? You are saying the Ijaw do not want to join. When Nnamdi was declaring it, how many Ijaw people did he consult? I just gave you my personal experience. You don't just declare something in the public and then come back to ask them to join. Do you, in Africa, do you carry them along from the beginning and make them feel? Or on what ideological basis or what sense of common interest with which you are doing that thing? So I'm an optimist in Nigeria, I'm an optimist in Eastern Nigeria, I'm an optimist outside. But we've got to find leaders that can actually forge unity and make people feel that they belong together and their interests will be respected. I think if we begin to do that, we'll begin to rebuild the broken walls of Eastern Nigeria.
All right, thank you, KJ. Let's go to Michael. Michael, if you can make it quick so that we can get it.
Okay, all right. You see, when the two professors meet, you know what goes. So excellent. Thank you so much, Professor Wariboko, and then happy Mother's Day to all women listening. Professor Wariboko, I just want to ask this personal question before we go forward, because I see your origin in America is from New York. Do you have a brother that used to work with me, you're talking about in the 80, 84, 85, 86, and they eventually work with the state government. Is that the same Wariboko or?
No, yeah, I know the guy. He was in Texas, a lawyer or so.
Exactly. So I was
he moved to work with. Is it Amechi when Amechi was governor? Or
so thank you for clearing that, because he was. You know, those days when we got here, we were working as security, and he's Wariboko and he's from Ijaw. So that's why I said, let me ask you. Yeah.
No, it's
all right.
Wariboko is a popular Ijaw, but I know the person you are talking about. He went back to to Port. But I think he's still there, so he's still in Port.
Okay. Thank you so much for clearing that, because sometimes it's good when you see somebody's name, you need to acknowledge that, just to say, we have historical perspective to that. So my question to you, that because you all analyze about war, because to me, and that's why a lot of time I come to this platform, because I always advocate for solution to Nigerian situation, rather than for us going back to historical part, because it's not helping us moving forward. Because when you talk about this Biafra war, and like I tell a lot of people, it's not only the eastern part that suffered. For me, I have an uncle who went to this war, never came back. And this was a very close uncle to me, because he's the one that always put me in the back. I have a good relation. And he was young. And that time in Nigeria, he went away through his mentality, and he never came back. So that itself hurts me personally today. So that's why I don't talk so much, because in any war, everybody suffers. And like you said, and I like the way you analyze it, there's no quantification to say you suffer more. War is war, and it's a destruction of life, period. So my question to you is, how do we as Nigerians can put this war behind us, especially we that we are living in diaspora, because we are the one that's supposed to me, to have that mentality, to have the ability to be able to put together a community or think tank that will move this Nigeria, so that this war, because every time I come around, people saying about this, it's not helping at all. How can we unite ourselves? Because everybody have emotion and everybody have sentimentality. It is there. I'm not taking that away from anybody, and anybody can say it. But to me, it is, I want us to discuss a solution to this aspect of us going from that historical perspective to a new world where we all can live together and be a one country. I know it is not easy, but we can do it. That's my belief. Thank you so much, Doctor. Go ahead.
Yeah. So thank you for that analysis. So, but in going forward, I think one thing that has been clear from historical experiences of other nations, we have to acknowledge people and what they went through. But it's not to get stuck in the past, because sometimes a simple sorry on either side or simple acknowledgement, like in South Africa, the Truth Commission, right? Let us tell what happened so everybody will know what happened, and then we can go forward. But in Nigeria, we are not acknowledging that, right? We are not acknowledging that people suffered on both sides, right? People, if you say the Igbo man suffered, the Igbo people say, because they will say they deserve it, but that's not the way to handle history. If you say, Ijaw people suffered, they say, how do you know that Ijaw people suffered? Because we don't even know. There are many kids growing up don't even know that River State and Bayelsa, Akwa Ibom and Cross River were part of the Eastern Nigeria. So that issue of not telling people, or the last speaker said, Biafra could be given an Igbo word. That is true. But because there was Bite of Biafra, and we know how it was named, so we can say if the the name was chosen because of that. That is the origin of it. Now, as a word, it could have another thing. But I tell that story not to fight over a name, but oftentimes to see there are more things that connect us. I'm doing a book with my friend, Professor Olufemi Vaughan, about the making of Nigeria. And I wrote the economic making of Nigeria in the pre-colonial time. And you could see that there were a lot of connections across the country. And so oftentimes we think that we came to know ourselves as Igbos and Ijaw only when we became under Nigeria. There are long connections of intermarriages, trade, and the ways of doing things. And sometimes we need to acknowledge, so we are not strangers to one another before the colonial time. Until today, we are not strangers. But how do we begin to build that friendship of, the diaspora can do, that we can set up committee to look at that. But I've seen in history is the people representative, the people who are the political aims that the local see as their representative, that if they begin to speak up and begin to do something, it will go a long way. Of course, when it started, people are going to resist it. When it started, people are going to still remember. But we keep working at it. If we've been working at it gradually, people will now begin to understand. But we don't want to confront it. We're not making effort. People just assume, as an Igbo man, is never going to like an Ijaw person. Or a Ijaw person will say, as an Igbo man, is not going to like me. The same way the Igbo man feels about the Hausa person or the Yoruba person. So we are not really, the country is even more divided today on ethnic lines, even though we have more connection, economical and other things than what it was. And I think our leaders need to focus there. But sometimes it pays our leaders to have divide and rule, to make us look at the things that would divide us, or we tell stories, because sometimes traditions are invented. Certain narratives are pushed and invented to bring people together. And that is a conscious effort to create a sense of belonging. And I think that it can still be done, if for nothing, for the sake of economic growth of the former Eastern Nigeria. How do you begin to build connection between the different states and promote economic growth? So, and I think that once we have leaders beginning to pay attention at the minimum to create economic connections, things that will enable people to move around easily and increase their economic well-being, I think we'll be on that way. At the same time that we are working on building a sense of unity among the people of the Eastern Nigeria.
All right. Thank you, Professor Wariboko. Michael, thank you so much for that question. Let's go to Saki. Saki, welcome to the show.
Yes. Thank you so much. Thank you. I'm privileged to be here, and I really am enjoying the discussion, and especially Nimi. I call him. He's my mate. I'm from Abonima. We all grew up the same time, almost the same time. So the experience, might not be particularly one for one the same experience as he felt and what he saw, what I saw. Interpretation matters as well, but it's generally on the average we felt, we went through the same, almost at the same age, growing up in Abonima, seeing these things, the bombing, they go to Niger and all that. I think Nimi was very cautious, and I really love the presentation, the way he presented the facts and the story and everything. There are so many other things that some people who are a little bit on the right side or the wrong side of caution might take it a bit further. But I think that what history does for us is to teach us this is what has happened. And this is, I think the last speaker asked a question. I don't want to go back to the history of what has happened. The Prof has already laid out in that book. It can be expanded. But the last speaker made a point. How do we get things together? How do we get back and resolve this so that we move on? I think for me, that's more important than any other thing that has happened. Now, there are two things, the Prof said, and he mentioned, in his presentation, he said it too, that nobody consulted us. The Ijaw or the Ijaw people, the minorities of River State, the people who were more or less on the fringes in the structure, the eastern region structure before the Biafra War. We were not consulted. We didn't know the war was coming. So a lot of people who did not support Biafra were suspicious, rather than actually saying that I don't like Igbos, I don't support them. They don't know what was going on. And so nobody knew where Biafra was taking us. And it heightened the crescendo of that suspicion came at that Go to Niger episode, when they started shipping people from Abonima, the Kalabari people, off to Iboland. A lot of Kalabari people died. They didn't come back from that experience, from that journey. It was forced. So I normally think of it this different way, that episode. That's why I said, my friend and my brother who wrote this book, was very cautious. And I think he did it in a balance, so that both sides will look at it in a more balanced way to say, this has happened, that it's not about ownership. But secondly, again, for us to move forward, I live in England. I've lived in the United States, in California, and I have a lot of Igbo friends. I'm partly Igbo. My grandparents are from Owerri. You understand? So my mother was brought up in Abonima. My mother's grandfather was a businessman, a trader who came from Owerri and set up. In fact, most of the Igbo business people, he brought them. And in fact, his first son mother was from Abonima, not an Igbo. More or less, he played out and had that child. But that was my first uncle.
I think Saki's phone connection is not steady.
He lives in London. I mean, what does he think? What's the difference between London and Nigeria?
Yeah, he lives in
Yeah, those are forefathers people. Yeah, it's always like that.
London. All right.
Okay.
So let's see if you can, Prof, you can say something from what.
Yeah. Let me say something about the historical stuff, right? Okay. Now this is also one part of history. If you ask the average Nigerian, who is the first ethnic group in Nigeria to bid for secession and went to war with the federal government, they will say the Igbos. No. You see, this is historical fact. It was the Ijaw people on February 23rd, 1966, declared a secession. How many people knew that? It was led by Adaka Boro. Adaka Boro read chemistry at UNN. And he was the president of the student union at in UNN, I think 64, 65. Isaac Adaka Boro. He declared on February 26 that the Ijaws were tired of Nigeria. It was not working. Remember, earlier in January, the coup has happened, and everything. And Agu Irosi have taken over, and Ojukwu has become the governor of Eastern Nigeria. Now, what did happen? Agu Irosi ordered Ojukwu to send forces to River State to stop the secession. The war, or the skirmish, you can call it whatever you want, went on for 12 days. As Boro had only 150 men, it was a Niger Delta Volunteer Force. He was a student, a former student of Ojukwu, and the president, he gained national popularity when he became this nation. As a matter of fact, he sued the federal government over the 1964 election that it was wrong. Ojukwu went and quenched that revolt. Then Agu Irosi set up a panel, a judge, and they sentenced Isaac Adaka Boro to death. People should know this. Ijaw elders went to beg Agu Irosi, please lift the death penalty. He refused. He was to be executed, I think later that year. I think by December 1966. By July, the Gowan coup happened, and Gowan saw this scene, kept him, and released that same May that Ojukwu declared Biafra, released Adaka Boro. And Adaka Boro then was made a major in the army, and he was given to Colonel Adenkule, the Black Scorpion. And he was very instrumental because he understood the creeks of River State in making sure that Nigerian soldiers were able to penetrate to Bonny Kensaru, where was the administrator also there, and other people to begin to recapture Ijaw State. So I'm doing what people say trust, right? So if you have a situation where you felt, and this is part of the speech that Adaka Boro read, he said on February 23rd, when he declared the Niger Delta Republic, that he wanted to succeed from Nigeria. He said, today is a great day, not only in your lives, but also in the history of the Niger Delta. Perhaps it will be the most fantastic day in a very long time. This is not because we are going to bring heaven down, but because we are going to demonstrate to the world what and how we feel about oppression. Remember your 70-year-old grandmother who still farms before she eats. Also remember your poverty-stricken people. Remember too your petroleum, which is being pumped out daily from your veins, and then fight for your freedom. Then Ojukwu stopped it with his troops, captured Adaka Boro, took him to Lagos to Guinea-Rossi, and they sentenced him to death. So, but you see, so when we say, what is the history of the trust? Beyond the local politics that Ashebe talked about, you could see this phenomenon. So many people don't even know this fact that the Ijaws wanted to leave Nigeria because they sensed that the country was not working for them. It was not going to work for them. So this sentiment was, in a sense, deeply rooted in Eastern Nigeria. The Ijaws felt it, then the Igbos felt it and moved. But you see, at that time, Ojukwu and Aguiyi-Ironsi, we are not blaming the totally, but did not just understand this sentiment. And Ojukwu was used to quench Aguiyi-Ironsi. Then all of a sudden, a year after, Ojukwu and his men were in the same position. Why do you think the Ijaws will not be suspicious? But all that is past. We can still rebuild. And that's what, but there's an Igbo saying, if you don't know where the rain met you, how can you know where to dry your clothes? And that's why some of this historical acknowledgement is important. That we also need to acknowledge that the first socialist movement in Nigeria was created by the Jaws. The war or the skirmish lasted for 12 days. It was a Ojukwu that was used to suppress it.
All right. Thank you so much. Saki, we are running out of time. Just 1 minute to finish your thoughts. We have to go to somebody else.
Yes. Thank you so much. I'm sorry, panel. I got disconnected somehow. Yeah, what I was saying, for me, the fundamental thing, we want to be a unit. We want to be part of, the whole structure. I live in England, and I've had experiences. I've mixed up with this Biafra. Listen, I said, look, if we sit on the table. For example, if you talk about Biafra, I don't know where I fit in as a Calabari person. And like I told you, I have relationship outside Calabari. So when the structure comes in, today we're talking about structure, the British forced us into Nigeria. And so we are confused. Can we start talking, for us to go forward, that's my interest. Can we start talking at constitutional level to say, what does Biafra mean to everybody that comes within the enclave? For us, that's why some Ijaws are saying that don't include us in your Biafra, because we've seen it during Okpara. During Okpara, we got nothing. But that is another story. So for me, for us to move forward, what he has done, what my friend has done, let us use it as a foundation, as a template. Now we can begin to talk to the Igbos, and they just kind of talk, and without the Igbos saying IPOB, and so it's like they are the only ones suffering. They're not. We're part of it. Thank you so much for giving me the chance to conclude. I appreciate it. I'm still here. I'm listening.
All right. Thank you, Saki. Let's go to Femi. Femi, you're next.
Yeah. Good morning, Prof. So I'm going to tie two things together real quick. In asking my question. So I think I'll put it at about 99% agreement rate. What you said about especially Pentecostalism in Nigeria. I think you actually did a bit of Ojoro when it came to the Catholic Church, but it's okay. So with the way Nigeria is today, I wonder what your opinion is about being together, and I'm tying this together with the way China has been able to evolve to where she is today, starting with that period of isolationism. How do you think we can move to that point and beyond the war and the divisiveness and the where we're so spiritual, but yet we're less on substance when it comes to other things? How do you think we can move forward in the centuries to come?
He says, the way you ended the statement with the centuries to come was frightening.
Because it looks like it's going to take us centuries the way
You,
we're
you,
going.
you are ask, you the answer a question. I think saying in London. Eh?
Yeah,
It's not in London. It's here.
I get the spirit of what you're saying because it's frightening. But I tell people that we could be in this situation for the next 200 years if we're not careful. Because people forget at the time of American independence, Brazil and Argentina were economically better developed countries than America. But see where they are, although they're better than Nigeria. So it's possible that because when I was in the university in 80 to 84, if you told me today Nigeria would be where it is, those days we are studying Marxian economics, we said things was going to change. But today we are worse off than what we are 40, 30 years ago. And so we've been rolling, being in one spot for over 40 years. So it's possible that we could still be here having this, our great-grandchildren having this kind of conversation 50 years from now. And it's possible, as you said, it might take us centuries. But my prayer, and this is only a prayer, that we don't wait that long, because in that long run, we are all dead. Maybe who knows what is left of us. But the wait, look, I feel like the major problem in Nigeria is lack of economic growth and development. Because if we begin to create wealth, create an economy to reduce some of this tension, but because we have scarcity of resources to cater for, that's why we are fighting all these things. So the first task of a government is, in as much as we are talking about rebuilding or so, if you're also creating an economy where people are prospering, they can take care of their family, they can take care of their children. So if I have my own to take care of myself, I don't see the Igbo man as my competitor, the Yoruba man as my competitor. If I can put my child in school and you can put it. So the focus on economic development, which China did to lift hundreds of millions of people out of poverty, we should be focusing on that. Now, but the moment you put your finger that the solution to Nigeria is robust economic growth and development, the moment you accept that fact, something else comes in. Now you ask yourself, what is the greatest obstacle to economic development in Nigeria? The greatest obstacle to economic development in Nigeria is politics. Because the politics in Nigeria is nothing more than a certain class capturing the state, having access to the state power to steal money for their own good. So having access to state power is now the means of production, not the other building factories also. That is the means of production. And so politics is the greatest obstacle. Of course, part of it, of course, you have religion there that is also confusing people rather than helping people. Because if you look at Western capitalism and the book that Max Weber wrote, Protestant Ethics and the Spirit of Capitalism, you see how the Protestant movement was able to create a new set of workers, new set of investment and consumption attitude that was able to lift up, in a sense, Western Europe out of poverty. But in Nigeria, our churches are not doing it. Whether they're Pentecostals, whether they're mainline churches or the Catholics, we are not doing that, right? So it's very important that we get the economy right. A lot of the infighting we are having, killing one another, hating one another, is deeply rooted to poverty, lack of growth. Now, that doesn't mean that if you have economic growth, racism or tribalism or ethnicity, all those things will go away. But we need to pay attention. But is the country moving towards economic development? No. Because we can say that in 50 years we are going to get to a place if we're on the path. But the way I see Nigeria, our path is, let's say, to the right this way. We are still facing left, going completely different direction. And we can walk on that direction for a millennium, and it might not work. I don't feel like we've turned around to face the direction of growth, sustainable growth. So for me, that is the issue. All these intra-ethnic fights we are having, all those issues, is partly to the extreme level of poverty and despondency and hopelessness. So one of the things we need to focus on is how do we create local economies of excellence? How do we give power, devolve power to the state, to the local government to create this? But then how do we rethink our the nature of politics so that the political becomes something that is useful for our own economic development and for our own well-being? I hope I'm able to respond to you.
Thank you so much, Mike, Femi. Let me go to Ovie. Ovie, your question.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you to our guests. Thanks for your time for being here with us. Let me start by quoting a French philosopher, Ernest Renan, who argued in 1883 that nations are built not just on shared memories, but also on a deliberate choice to forget certain divisive or inconvenient events like our civil war, injustice, or origin that did not align with the narratives of the nation state. I guess my question is that are we ever going to get to that point whereby, as a nation, the way it is now, we need just forget, we collectively agree to forget the past and approach a new narrative, or you don't even see us ever coming together at all, which I believe you touched on the last answer. So, are we ever going to? Because you just listed our trauma, our bit of what happened after the independence, and the current political structure, I will argue, is deliberately structured to punish those who lost the war. And by extension, me and you, I'm from Edo State, and you are from Delta State. We are at the receiving end of that punishment being dished out to those that lost the war, politically speaking. So, do you think we can navigate all this and still afford to forge ahead, or it's just that's never meant to be from the one?
Rudolph, could I tack on my question? I don't have a good connection. I'm having a lot. It's been my turn.
No.
Well, whenever it is my turn, somebody has to show his ass. Why?
Okay, that's okay. Pansat, hold on. After V, I'll bring you in. All right, go on. Prof.
So in 2019, I published a book called Ethics and Society in Nigeria, and I addressed this issue. How do we create a narrative that could build sense of national belonging? Building a nation is a deliberate effort by the leaders, right? And so we are not building a nation. If certain part of the country, certain parts feel like they are being punished, then what should a leader do to ameliorate that kind of setting? How do you create balance, right? So building a nation is not just only about creating the narrative and working on it and giving people a sense of purpose. Now take for instance, if the people say, well, if the Igbos feel they're they are being punished, not true. But I give an example, right? Look at the way the port structure functions in Nigeria. The Igbo man has to import his things into Lagos and drive it across to Onitsha. While if Port Harcourt port was functioning, it's easier for the goods to come to Port Harcourt if it functions well, and then move it to the east. So look at the extra cost of doing that. So a good leader will sit down to say, if I let Eastern Nigeria grow at its best, the country is growing. That is what a leader should do. If I think of a situation where the money generated in Eastern Nigeria, the bulk of it stays there. Now, take for instance, in many Igbo communities, they have cars and they pay car insurance. Now, most of these car insurance companies have their headquarters elsewhere. So the money is drained from the east and it goes elsewhere. The same way we have churches, they'll collect all the money and deposit it in another part of the country. And the banks, they are made more powerful, or the bank branches, they are made more powerful. So these are the ways, as a federal leader, you need to think about how do you make an economy, the money they generate, a good part of it stays within that region to enable growth. And of course, some of it will go elsewhere because you want that flow of action. As an Igbo governor, how do you think about that? Now, we might not like some of the things that Abacha did. I'm not speaking of Abacha, but Abacha created the 6-region system. And one of the things he did was, okay, let the oil companies go back to where they do the operation, rather than all of them be outside that place. And he did, right? But for some mysterious reason, and maybe some up to foolishness, all of a sudden there was crisis in the Niger Delta, and they all moved back. So the effect of job creation or the whole effect of synergy or cost that would have benefited that economy was lost. But this is what people need to think about. So to come back to your question, if you are going to create a nation, you need to deliberately create a narrative that will pull people together, but not also the narrative. What kind of actions are you taking to make everybody feel that they belong to the same family? And how are you creating wealth across? There are people, about 10 years ago, I was coming from New York. On the train station in Penn Station, I'm coming to Massachusetts, Boston, and I met a white woman. We sat down together. She was like, at that time, 44. And she told me that was the first time she was visiting New York City. And I was like surprised. You live in Massachusetts, Boston, or no, New Hampshire. You've never been to New York City. She said, no, she didn't even need to. Because the economy is created that she will grow up in New Hampshire, get good education in New Hampshire, finish, go to university, get good university education, get good job, survive, maintain a family, and so she doesn't need to move to if she wants to move to New York or Boston or Los Angeles, that is her choice. But we create a situation in Nigeria where people living in their state or region cannot complete their good education, will not fulfill their life until they move to other parts of the country. Now, I'm not against people moving, but a good economy should create regions where people can find their fulfillment within the place that God has blessed, if they want to move. But when we begin to create lopsided situation that fuels rural-urban migration, or from region to region, people cannot find peace, we are not giving people a sense of belonging. So nation building is not just about narrative. It's not just about telling historical stories to move forward. At the present, what are we doing? At the future, what are we doing? And how are we creating connections between different regions, economically, politically, to strengthen? The more nodes of connection we have between regions, between towns, the stronger the union will be. But if we are lopsided and we think that certain people do not count, either because of some historical antecedent or because they are minorities, or because of what has happened in some places, we are not building a nation. And that is not helping anybody. The growth of Nigeria is likely going to benefit everybody than the lopsided political and economic development that right now we have in Nigeria.
All right, thank you so much. Let's go to Pansat. We have AY, we have Michael. No, not Michael. We have Igbo Basics, and we have Richard. I could see you guys. We'll get to you. We have to do this in about 30 minutes. So, Pansat, you're next.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rudolph. And welcome to the show, Professor Nimi. I think it's Wariboko, right? We welcome you here, and we appreciate your honesty and your work as an academic. A lot of your discussion here is academic in nature. That's okay. I want to first tell you that I agreed with your earlier part of your presentation when you first came on the platform, and I was listening to you. I'm going to make a couple of comments. I don't have a very good connection, so I don't know what's happening. I'm going to try to make it very snappy here. Number one, the narrative that the Jaws try to create, like you have and you have the Jaws.
All right. Pansat,
you actually, yeah. Can you hear me?
Okay, go ahead. Try again. But if it doesn't work, if it doesn't, you can write a comment.
No, maybe
okay. I'll go outside and I'll call from outside.
All right.
Yeah. Let me say that the narrative that the Jaws try to create, like you have the Hausas, you have this is.
All right, Pansat, we can hear you.
Rudolph, if you can hear me, I'm gonna go outside and call outside. I don't have a good connection inside here.
All right.
So what I'm saying is that, can you hear me, Rudolph?
Yeah,
Rudolph, can you hear me?
Yes.
Just nod if you can hear me, then I'll just talk. Rudolph, can you hear me?
Yes. We can hear you.
Rudolph, can you hear?
We can hear you if you can hear us.
Turn out and come back in. I'll come back.
Go out and come back. Go out and come back.
This is live TV. All right, Richard, you're next.
Yeah, good evening, Professor and Dr. Rudolph. Professor, I don't have much to say, but listening to you about Ijaw's involved in Biafra war, what I read, who even suggested the name Biafra was Chief Frank Obiko. And those who were present at Eastern Consultative Assembly, names like Jotoni Fubara, Iyala, Ambassador Blessing Aporode Clark, General George Kurubo, and Chief Frank Obiko, and other people. So Biafra was not only about Igbos. Ojukwu consulted. There were prominent Ijaw people who were at that even higher declaration. It might not be all of them, but many prominent Ijaw people were there. And you said that Adaka Boro, yeah, everybody who read little history knew that it was Adaka Boro that first declared, secessionist group in Nigeria. I read it before, and I had it over and over. So what I'm trying to say, sir, you are wonderful. You are a teacher. I listen to you. Is very interesting. But Ijaw people were involved. What really happened was Nigeria, knowing that these two people, if they could come together and that the war could go, either way. So that's why they penetrated Ijaw, some Ijaw people, and we know what happened. For example, you see Gowon created River State out of Eastern region, created East Central State, and created Southeast. And this Southeast was now Cross River and Akwa Ibom. So, Prof, my question is, Gowon that called these people Southeast, Akwa Ibom and Cross River. What happened that these two states are now in South-South? Because, Prof, as an intelligentsia, you people who are well educated should come together and address issues in Nigeria. Because I don't see why should Cross River and Akwa Ibom, that was Southeast state before, is now in South-South geopolitical zone. Let me tell you, sir, there was a time one accident happened in Akwa Ibom. One church collapsed. CNN was calling that place Southeast, not South-South. And this South-South is very confusing. For me, sometimes I'm not so well read like you people, but when I listen to a professor or a doctor, somebody who is well educated, well advanced in education, coming and calling himself or herself, I'm from South-South, that does not exist in anywhere in geography or something like that, it baffles me, sir. So please, you have said you have done well. Well, listen to it is an honor. But all this is, I think, the manipulation is that the division between Ijaw and Igbo people is not it's not ordinary. The people who are doing this are people that doesn't want even Ijaw people to live like human beings in their own land.
All right.
Finally, you said Nnamdi Kanu never consulted. Nnamdi Kanu, I was listening to him very often. Ijaw people, before Nigerian government attacked him, Ijaw people were coming to him in Umuahia, although it could not be the Ijaw of your class. But I know that thousands of Ijaw people are even IPOB members, like you, ordinary Igbo people, ordinary Igbo youths. But where you are saying, I can understand when you say it didn't consult maybe the elites, but young Ijaw people were still members of IPOB members. Finally, even he met Ankyo Briggs. Ankyo Briggs is also a well-known Ijaw leader. So I think there's a kind of Nnamdi Kanu. It's the same thing you are saying, sir. It's the same thing that Igbo people said, he never consulted anybody. So not only that he didn't consult Ijaw people, the same thing Igbo people are saying. So thank you, sir. But Ijaw people are involved in the IPOB, but maybe not your class. Thank you, sir.
All right. Thank you, Richard.
Yeah. Thank you very much. If you listen to when I talked about the name where Biafra came, I did clearly stated that it was an Ijaw man that suggested the name. I didn't just want to bring his name from Apigo. I knew. So I didn't say that there were no Ijaw people there, right? There were no Ijaw people there. I said it was an Ijaw man that in the consultative assembly, so which means people were there. So, but so to correct that point, even when I did talk about IPO, right? Now the question is, like you said, even Igbos are not happy that there was no broad consultation before Nnamdi Kanu did that. I'm happy that you accepted that. So other parts are going to feel the same way. But I also distinct that when I said when the lecture took place, it was supposed to take place in Boston, and when they consulted the two Igbos on the panel and didn't consult, even though I was the only professor in that university that facilitated the coming of the Anambra governor. And I said, when the IPOD people came in, and I made that wait a minute, how do you say you are going to create something that includes my people and make me feel like I belong, but yet you are not, it didn't consult, even though I'm the only Ijaw professor here that even made this thing to happen. right? I told you at that point, one of their leaders came in and said, no, that is not their intention, that the people who called and talked to OK and Debate and others who were making trouble are not truly IPOD leaders. I don't know if you heard me, so I made that. I've been trying to be fair in telling this because people who are there are still alive. They can correct it. So I made it fair. Now, to come back to the Southeastern, this Cross River and Akwa Ibom, they were part of the Eastern Nigeria, just like Bayelsa and River State. They were just called, it was Eastern Nigeria as a whole, but when they created, they called them Southeastern State because it's the most eastern part of the Eastern Nigeria. That's why it was called Southeastern State. There is no magic about that. Then you have the East Central, which in today we call the Southeast in the region, and then we have the River State, right? So, but this River State, Bayelsa, Cross River, and Akwa Ibom, they were part of the what it's called the core Cross River Ogoja Rivers movement, the core state movement. They were fighting for their independence, for their minority status to be recognized. So that state movement was on within the former Eastern Nigeria, led by Okpara. So let's get it. So Gowon did not just make a mistake by creating them after the war. He may have created it for his own strategic purposes, whatever it is, but to say that those people don't have the right to claim that name or it was a misnomer is wrong because they were the most eastern part of the South. Now, when Abacha created the 6th region, this region are in the South. So it's South-South. Anything above the Niger is not. Things below the Niger, it's South. And then within the South, the Igbos are on top. And these rivers, Bayelsa, Cross River, they are South-South. That's how the name came about. They're South-South. So there's nothing like say they cannot be South-South. If you make an argument that they don't have a right to the name, you may likely offend them because we're not recognizing their separate identity geographically and ethnically. That doesn't mean that there are no Igbo origin in some part of those two states. Just like in River State, you have that, right? That is not the point. But geographically and historically, there was what they call the core state movement. And that was the basis. So Benue Plateau was also created because Taka and Co. were fighting for that. So I just want to make that clear so there's no confusion. The issue whether there is an inter-regional or inter-ethnic competition that puts certain parts of the country down, that is also a fact. That's why I told you, if you listen, that even the construction of seaports and the way it functions or the way the financial system functions does not favor the regions equally. So I made those points. But does that mean that I don't have faith in Nigeria? I do. I want Nigeria to come together. And that's what I talk about. How do you build the narrative that will put us together? How do you create the fairness in allocation of resources that will put us together? How do we give everybody the ability to stay where they are if they want to and flourish just like any other person? So I talk about this. So I don't think
please, Dr. Rudolph, please, I'll very just 1 minute. Please, sir, understand me very well. I said that it was Gowon that did the right thing by calling those people Southeast states. Now, then General being very manipulative, I mean the military after the Civil War, knowing that anything Southeast with to the sea will be called Igbo land. That is why they separated this Southeast. They called it now South-South. That's what I'm trying to say. I'm not saying that Gowon gave that name rightly because it belonged to that place, Southeast. Because those people are called Southeast. For putting them in South-South is very, very manipulative. That's what I'm trying to say. And finally, you saying that Ojukwu arrested Adaka Boro. That means Ojukwu and they were not trying to separate from Nigeria. They were trying. They were fighting for. They were fighting for one Nigeria.
Exactly.
Thank you, sir.
Exactly.
Thank you,
No,
sir.
exactly. That is the point. Exactly. But within a year, things have changed. That's why I'm saying that this feeling of oppression of the Eastern Nigeria was deeply rooted. It first bubbled up through the Ijaws, and then it bubbled up through the Igbos. I made that point that it was deeply rooted. People felt oppressed, either from the federal government or within the region. The feeling of dissatisfaction. So yeah, Ojukwu and co were trying to keep Nigeria together when they stopped arguing in Rosi. But I made the point that, but a year after, the tide had changed, and therefore Ojukwu now wanted to get out. But then, as the Adaka Boro have also changed his course, he now, when go and release him, he was now made a major in the Nigerian army to fight on the side of Nigeria. And I did also make the point that the war, the division of war, was not clean within the Ijaw land to say, oh, every Ijaw person was automatically for Nigeria, or every Ijaw person was automatically for Biafra. They were mixed, and that's why after the war, the Ijaw descended in some communities into killing themselves. Because now, it's like there was enemy within them, and the enemy was not outside. An outsider was within them because they were split during the war, and they paid the price for that split by the Nigerian side, and they paid the price also inflicted on them by the Igbo side. At the end of it, right, in certain communities like in Abonima, we know how people would report their enemies or their friends, whatever it is, and then the soldiers would catch the person and shoot them. And some people were also doing that during the war itself. So I try to give a sense of what was happening during that period until we come to the fact that there are no clean saints and there are no darkened demons. And everything about history sometimes is an ambiguity. When we try to declare one side holy or completely demonic, that's when we miss it. It's a kind of an ambiguity. And our ability to accept that ambiguity, to address it, and to make everybody feel a sense of belonging. That is what I am talking about. Whether somebody is manipulating people in any society, there will be people who will gain by using divide and rule. That was how even the British were able to rule Nigeria, a place like Nigeria. But we that are alive today, especially by those of us that have crossed into 60, those who are older than us, they're all gone. It's people in my generation, I mean, a few years, how many people in Nigeria live up to 80 or above, that have to now begin to say, how do we heal Nigeria? And that's why I agreed to come up on this show to say, it's not a question of apportioning blame. We recognize what has happened in history, but going forward, how do we begin to rebuild? We may not finish the rebuilding in our time, but let us start from somewhere, and the next generation will take it up to another level.
All right, we have spent 3 hours. I think we need a small break, 3 minutes. And when we come back, we take the last 3 people, which will be Igbo Basics, Righteous Man, I see Pansat back and AY. So let's take about 3 minutes break, and we'll be right back.
Please let me just talk for a couple of minutes. I don't have a good connection.
No, we don't have that couple of minutes. 3 minutes, we'll be back.
Can you hear me?
No.
Okay, let me say this.
When your mazolo bio, akwa mazolo bio, Max, if you bunye go kwanu mo no fube nazo olaga ni piazugo, ulaga do ni piazugo, akwa wilo chiyo biko rapuzo, kona bazia. Onyo mazoro biko abamba wazoro dasari ibya unyane bana mo ulaga dori byazigo mo ulaga dori byazigo abamba wilo chilo bigora buzoro ona wazia. Mazi wakoma odogu no kwerezi neka onyoma nigadele mo mazi ni bazi ibu go with melody. Odogu na chala noka Ezi wande mliga delemo Olaga doni pezigono Ma olaga doni pezigo Amama wilo chilo Bikora muzoro Anabazi Te Onyama zoro de Mama was the sorry. Even when
Sorry about that. I'm not sure where it's Pansat. It's Pansat. So good. All right. Pansat. This is very important to you that you join us today. But you have bad. Okay, we have to remove him. All right, so thank you so much. We have to round up. We spent more than 3 hours. Initially, I was pressing for 90 minutes. And Prof, you were saying 90 minutes is long. You can see how we spent more than 3 hours in just a few questions. So let's go to, let me see, who is next? I think Igbo Basics. Welcome. Unmute yourself, please.
Thank you, Dr. Lemegis Rudolph.
Yeah.
And our brother, Wariboko. The Wariboko, the other Wariboko you were talking about earlier on, would that happen to be text Wariboko?
Yes, I think so. Yeah.
All right. I could connect with you in quite a few ways as far as your stories from a 6-year-old perspective and experience of the war. Though I'm in the 70th floor now, so these days I hardly, what else is there to talk about? What else is there to talk about but the truth, and nothing but the truth? So when you have made your presentations here today, in the most part, it's purely the truth and nothing but the truth, from your perspective, of course. And so I could share that. When you talked about looking up and seeing the pilot seeing you with his headphone and stuff like that, I could readily connect with that. And when you talked about living through the dreams or the war and your friends telling you about them cooking their shoes to make, even today I can still make a Mendes soup, which we call win the war soup. I don't know if you ever made a win the war soup. If you have 1 scoop of soup to last you for 1 gari, you will extend it to 5 to make sure that it can last you the next 5 days. So I can connect with that. Some of us had the privilege of going to school naked when we started, okay? Some of us had the privilege of, if you have to go to school, you have to put your hands above to see whether you have school age. And that's why today, when we speak or when we pass through anything, some things don't faze us. It doesn't matter whether you have money or you don't get money. Go ask Okpabia Sika how far. We're in there now. Let me just put it this way. We are all in the same ship or country, in the same ship, in the same Titanic ship or country named Nigeria. And if it sinks, all of us go down, whether we like it or not. As you walk through the streets of the US today where you live, if you see me passing the street, you see you. Because the first thing you see is somebody with the same kind of kinky hair like you, same kind of face. You might even be tempted to speak in Ijaw language. Just like if I pass you, I could say, nah, kedu.
Odema.
If you turn around and said, Odema, we have connected immediately.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, it doesn't matter whether you're a Ijaw or you're a fake. You are my brother. Mm-hmm. And we'll strive for the same survival. So to me, you have already made all the necessary points that were supposed to be made here today. There's really no need to struggles. I have lived through East Central State. I have lived through Eastern Nigeria. I have lived through East Central State. So I've been there, I have done that. And you pointed out, how do we go forward? Much as I don't have much to say today, because I try to conserve my energy so I don't upset myself from the things that are going on. This individual situation where one man carry everything, they chop am. People, they look at. The situation that we are facing in our home country called Nigeria is such that people prefer to go to burials than to go to work. That is happening. Why do they choose that? Because when they go to burial, they can eat, they can drink, at least for that moment. But the ones whose head are still intact prefer to go slug it out and try to cultivate so they can have something to eat tomorrow. Wariboko, if we start talking, we can talk long, but I'm not going to go there. What I'll just ask is this. As far as the war that was the basis of your conversations, were there really any winners or losers of the Nigerian Civil War?
That's actually, I've thought about this. It's it's a very difficult question to answer. In the sense that if you go just beyond, they signed ceasefire and end of war agreement, Obasanjo, then Obasanjo and Effiong, whatever, signed. If you say, yeah, so they are clearly the Biafran side signed the surrender, they go and came up and say, no victor, no vanquish, right? But and he did that to say we can't really know. But if you ask yourself, and in the preface to the poem, I asked myself, what did we really fight for? And what did we get? Because now, let's even assume, according to the signing of the letter, the federal side won. It turns out to be a Pyrrhic victory because the country is more divided. We've not addressed the issues. The country is stuttering. And if you I talked to some Igbo leaders, and they said, yeah, we acknowledge the loss of souls, of people, property, and everything that happened. But the Ijaw-led coup, and to say, and things that come after, what was the purpose? Because whether we can argue whether Ijaw led an Igbo coup, people say no, it was an ideology, and we know who he wanted to install in power if he had succeeded. But many Igbos will say the Igbos were doing very well, relatively speaking, before that coup, considering where they've come from in the 30s, how quickly they've grown their intellectual base, civil service base, the army, and the education. And then that coup happened. And everything began to unravel. So now there is speculation. If that coup didn't happen and led to eventually to the civil war, would things have been different? So these are very crucial questions, not just we sign papers and somebody won. If we've not learned our lessons as a country, and I think we've not learned our lesson, right? Then we ask ourselves, what is the purpose of the war? And I've talked to some Igbo intellectual and leaders. They said even the war destroyed certain part of Igbo culture. Said that some of the things you are talking about, some of the so-called revolution, how Igbo culture have changed. They said a good number of that happened after the war. That the sense of bonding community, that the Igbo State Union that came together to train people, to make things happen, that you don't find that level of unity anymore, even among the Igbos. So you see that, so they said, look, that January coup of 1966, if you go back to say, should the country have had that coup? Yes, things were bad. There was corruption. All the things that Ojukwu said were right. But did that coup set us back more than probably it took us forward? And these are the kind of questions that historians, and if you really discuss some of these things, will begin to come out. So at the end of the day, I don't want to diminish people's suffering, the death or so. If you lost somebody, you lost somebody. I'm not diminishing that. But as a country, what have we learned any lesson from that experience? Has that war made us better as a nation? I would say so far, no, that it has not made us better. So at the end of the day, Biafra lost. Nigeria also lost. And we need to come to that conclusion. They are losers, right? And we can say who lost more or so. But we have not really gained anything for fighting to spill our blood. I mean, for instance, if you are an Igbo leader today, and you remember that thousands were massacred, that Kano massacre. And of course, my cousin too many people from the eastern Nigeria were also massacred in that Kano region. But you see, people paid with their blood. And today we are leading people, whether in River State or in Abia State or so. Are we cognizant of the fact that people spilled their blood and we are there embezzling money and making things worse? So when you think about the war in that, it leaves you sad. And I'm from River State, but there's no time that I go to Nigeria that I don't find myself, at least in Abia State. I just have a friend who's from Abia. So there's no local government in Abia that I've not been to over the years. So I could, and you see that, you ask yourself, what are the leaders doing about these suffering masses? You go to River State, you ask yourself the same question. You go to Biafra, you ask yourself, of course, it's the same question all over the country, right? But the question is, this is a country where we fought war to remain one. But it appears we've not learned any lesson. And for me, that is scary, because if you are not learning from history, we're going to repeat the same thing. And if this time it happens, it's going to be more devastating than ever.
Okay.
So Rudolph, please, just one second, please.
Nobody should talk. Nobody, please. We have less than 10 minutes, and I want to give a chance to people who are here to say something. So what we're going to do, Prof, is I will tell 3 people who are left to ask their question together. You answer it once. I don't want anybody to feel that we didn't get to them. We can get to 3 of them for the time we have. AY, go ahead. Just a question, please. After AY, and then Pansat.
Yeah, Prof, thank you very much. I think you really clear a lot of things that are just hanging, you know. On this platform, we have a lot of argument on this issue. But here is a question I really want to ask. What was the basis for including non-Igbo region in Biafra? Was it founded on the idea that the Igbos own those lands? Or was it based on mutual agreement? In other words, do the Igbos have ownership claim to land outside the southeast, especially the south-south? Yeah, I have other stuff. Let me not take your time. Thank you.
Thank you, AY. I like that. Righteous Man, just go straight to the questions so that we'll get everybody.
Dr. Rudolph, I would have opted out because you give other people enough time, and when it's come, when you know you are running short of time, you now choose the people you will squeeze in. I would have said, let me just listen because it's unfair. Well, Prof, I appreciate you. I live in Nigeria, I live in Lagos. I am one person that disagreed that there was a civil war in Nigeria. There was no civil war because the Biafran soldiers never marched to the north or middle belt. And even when they were in Ore, Benin City, they were pushed back. So if you look at it, it was the Nigeria and Biafra war. It's not, by my own definition, it's never civil. That's number one. Number two, sir.
Second question.
Yeah, my question is this, sir. In the history of the modern revolution or contemporary revolution, have the elite class like yourself from the academic industry, have people of the elite class led any successful revolution in anywhere in the world?
All right, thank you so much. Let me take a question from the comment section while we see if Pansat can come back in and be able to ask a question. There's someone I wanted to get their question. It's been a while. I totally missed it. But let me pick this one I can see here. Serious question. Do the Igbos feel they contributed in any way to the faults that follow Nigeria today? Do they believe they committed any atrocities during the Civil War? That's a question from the comments, and I think I see Pansat. Let me give him one more chance and see if he can be able to squeeze in one question. Pansat, one question, please. Go ahead.
All right. Let me apologize for my reception here. It's really bad. But let me just go straight to it.
Go ahead. All right, we try.
Sorry, it's in the Zoom. Just ignore it.
We try. It's not our fault. So, Prof, answer the questions you have now. Maybe if yes, I know there's no time anymore. You have to leave.
Yeah. But so you may ask him to write it. Maybe.
Yeah, right. I told him write the question. He likes to get it from his own voice. My voice.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So he said, when were the non-Igbo groups included in Biafra? Was it that the Igbos felt they own the land outside the core Igbo areas? No, that was not the feeling. Remember, they were already in eastern Nigeria, and eastern Nigeria included Igbos, the Ijaws, the Efik, the Akwa Ibom people, and Ibibios, and every all of them were there. So Ojukwu was the governor of that region. So when it declared Biafra to cover that region. It was not the fact that they automatically claimed that every other person in the region or every land from Enugu and Soka down to the Atlantic belonged to the Igbos. No, that was not what, because it was a region under the colonial system. So Okpara led the same place, Zik led the same place. Upon the far part, by the time Zik and Co were leading it, included some part of Cameroon. And then Cameroon was given a chance to vote, and they left Nigeria and joined their counterpart in the Republic of Cameroon. So that is how the eastern region came from. And as I explained earlier, the name Biafra was chosen because the Bight of Bonny, if you look at the map of Nigeria today, go and change the name from Bight of Bonny after the war, just to deny, I mean, like to erase everything about Biafra. Then they called it Bight of Bonny. So once again, the name for the Republic of Biafra came from the name of that body of water. Again, when Ojukwu declared it in the consultative meeting, like we said it earlier, there were non-Igbos too, there were Ijaws also. And as we learned is from Opugo that they were debating the name, and it was German that says, why are we debating other names? Why don't you pick the bite of the name from Biafra, because it's already a water body that kind of marks the southern boundary of the whole of eastern Nigeria. So people felt, well, it makes sense. So it's not going to be like it's named after one language or one group or so. So they picked that historical name. So that's where the name Biafra came from. Now, as we also learned earlier, were they Ijaw people that supported the declaration of Biafra and they were integral to it? Yes. No doubt about that. Were they also Ijaw people from that beginning who were against that? Yes. I've always said Ijaws were divided. There's no clean stuff. Now, one of the most prominent Ijaw men at that time in the eastern Nigeria was Dr. Nabo Graham Douglas. He was the Attorney General of the eastern Nigerian government under Ojukwu. And for historical purposes, he's also the #1 son. When they created the SAN system, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, he's #1 on the list. He was the first person to be given that title in Nigeria. He was an Ijaw man. But that was after the Ojukwu. So, but he was not in support of the declaration of the because he argued that it doesn't think that Ijaw people will be treated well. Just to show, and then it's not something we are making up now. He actually published a book, end of 1967-68, called Ojukwu's Rebellion and World Opinion. It was translated immediately during the war to many languages. It was just in the heart of the war. Immediately he left Ojukwu's government, and Ojukwu declared he left the government, and then he wrote this book of protest. It's called Ojukwu's Rebellion and World Opinion. Check the library near you in the US. It's a small book. You can read it. He stated his reason why, and also stated other Igbos who didn't support the war and why he was against it. His arrest and his meeting with Ojukwu after that. So just to tell us that yes, there were Ijaws that supported it. There were also Ijaws that didn't. But right from the beginning, there was this division. I wanted to, because it was asking, was it a mutual agreement all the way or the land? So that is how the name came in. Whether the war was civil or not, I thought the civil means a war for people in the same country. So at least Biafra, before Biafra was declared, Eastern Nigeria was part of Nigeria. So when they fought the war, it became a civil fight that's between them. That is my understanding of what the word civil war means. Maybe I may be wrong. It's not so much about whether you move to other region or so, or they even move to the Midwestern region, right? But the issue was that if you are all in one country and there is a fight, then it becomes civil. Just like America also had a civil war. So that is my understanding. But if somebody has a different understanding, I'm willing to learn from it. But that is not really the point for me. People fought, people died. And war is basically you're asking that you should kill somebody and destroy their property. Right? That is what basically war is. I understand that. He also asked the question, do people of elite class successfully lead a revolution? So I don't know what that question is going, but it depends on how you define elite. Lenin was well educated and he led a revolution. The people that led the Russian Revolution and the people there, they were well educated. Fidel Castro wasn't a peasant, right? So you can look at that from this. But being an intellectual does not automatically mean that one can lead a revolution. The intellectual have their own function. Karl Marx wrote about it, inspired people to carry out revolution. He never successfully carried out any revolution, but Lenin that read his work got inspired. So there's no theory that says that only intellectuals can lead a revolution. Anybody, if you are brave enough to fight and if you succeed, you can lead a revolution. There's nothing that says Nnamdi Kanu cannot lead the revolution and win. Yeah, he can. So any class can actually. There are other minor revolutions that are led by, like the Agbekoya revolution. Really in Yoruba land after the war, they were led by peasants, right? And they were able to, although they didn't eventually overthrow the Western region government after the war. So fights could come from anywhere. Did the Igbos believe that they committed any atrocities? That is a question I cannot answer for them. If others are able to answer that question or people, but it's when we begin to meet and talk and bear witness that some of these things will come up. If you read that Owen's book, New York, My Village, although it's fictionalized, it showed a situation where the Biafran soldiers attack a whole village or so. But because we didn't collect most of this oral history or history, some of these facts we don't know. But basically, war, do we understand war? War is where human beings commit atrocities against one another, right? It depends on what level of atrocity you're committing. Because basically, war is that we're sending you to go and kill the other person over there, destroy his property, subject him till he bows down. And that kind of violence is already atrocity. Are we talking about atrocity in a different sense of genocide, or what people define as genocide, or other things, or things that are against the rules of international engagement? That is a different story. But war, let us not be clear. If you think of war seriously, you are sending your children, your uncles, your daughters to say, go over there and kill that person. That's the only way you win a war. Subjugate them.
Could I come in, please? I mean, are you trying to stall me out, Rudolph? Let me come in a little bit. Will you let me in a little bit?
Where are you? I don't know where you are. We're rounding up, and he's giving his final. He has to leave exactly.
Okay,
in
just
1
give
minute.
me a couple of minutes.
1 minute. 1 minute. Pansat, 1 minute. He
Let
has
me
to
just
go.
say, please. There's a lot of things the professor is speaking about simultaneously. Now, some of the stuff that he said, I agree with, right? It's a known thing, right? But let's not try to. In Nigeria, we have what we call the Wazobia. That Wazobia means the major tribes in Nigeria, right? If you are an Ijaw person, the northern, if you're in the north, they will do exactly what they will do to you as if you're an Igbo man, right? The Ijaws try to equate themselves like the Igbos or the Biafrans. Biafra is a much larger thing than the Igbos. The Igbos are much larger than the Ijaws. The Ijaws population, I don't know if they're even 1 million people, right? So the Ijaws, they're loud and noisemakers, right? They're part of our region, but they're not in competition with us. I think that Ojukwu made a mistake. He should have decimated them, conquered them in a manner that they wouldn't even be running their mouth at the Igbos. We're not the same thing. We're a big tribe with millions of people, maybe 120 million Igbos.
Passat,
Yeah.
we're out of time.
Okay, so but hold on.
You didn't go to your question. Go to your question straight.
You should be defining the terms. I don't want you. We have what we call Wazobia. We don't have Wazobia, Ijaw. We have Wazobia.
Passat, what's your question?
Yeah,
we
so
have
my question,
no time.
Yeah, just hold on, Rudolph.
He has to go. It's not about me. I'm here. I can stay here for 1 hour and listen.
It is about you. I don't know. Are you an Igbo man or you are you?
All right. So, Prof, round up your thoughts, because I know you have to go.
Yeah. I mean, my final thought is that I don't think, with due respect to Passat, I don't think his views represent the majority of the views of Igbo people that I know. I don't think they feel like the minorities should be wiped away, or you should. I mean, that doesn't help.
He's a noisemaker. Just ignore him.
Yeah, that doesn't help. And the Jaws are not 1 million. You should go and check this statistic. The Jaws used to be declared the 4th largest ethnic group in the country. So they're not only in Rivers State, they're in Bayelsa, Delta, Ondo. But the point about it is that even if a group in Nigeria is 10,000, if you really want to build a nation, how could somebody say we should go and wipe out the 10,000 because they didn't matter? And then what he just said kind of almost unraveled the conversation we had. So if you're an Ijaw man outside here hearing somebody say so, he's going to
Rudolph, let me ask him a question now.
Passat.
No, I've removed him. Don't worry about him.
Enough of this. And I mean it, enough of it. Nobody's going to decimate anybody. I'm sorry. That's not the purpose here.
Don't put any. Don't help.
No. Nobody should be talking about decimating anybody, because right now, Asade Jokibo is crying that in their backyard is being taken over. That's why I said the Titanic ship is sinking. What do we do about it?
Igbo Basic, our guest has to. He has to go. Please. Let's round.
So sorry about that, Wariboko.
Yeah.
No. Yeah, it doesn't. I'm okay. The good thing, I believe that it doesn't represent the majority of the views of the Igbos that I know and I interact with a lot of them. So it doesn't bother me at all. So in every community you have people who don't want to come together with others, and there'll be at the extreme. But I still, if I meet him outside, I'll still regard him, as a brother. Fine. It's okay. So let us not dwell on that. As long as the majority of us on both sides feel like, look, how do you move the country forward? And I will end one thing that keeps surprising me about Nigerians, educated Nigerians or so. My son, daughter, or your son or your daughter is not competing with an Igbo person or Yoruba person or Hausa person. Today, your children are competing with every student on the global level. When I was born, did my mother expect that I would come here and teach in an elite university? So I got that position because I competed with every other person in the world that applied, and I got it. And increasingly, the world is becoming that way. For us to think that our competition is only against our neighbors, if you set up a proper company that is functioning, whether you're an Igbo man or so, and you find that the Chinese graduate or Swedish graduate or a Brazilian graduate is going to do your work, you employ that person eventually. So the idea that our children are competing against anybody in outside land, that era is gone. Because these children that we have, the world is now a stage. The question is, how do we train our children, whether they're Igbos, Yoruba, Ijaw, to make sure that they can hold up their own in the rest of the world and get in life? For the fact that you are born in Onisha or in Abonima or in Sagamu does not mean that you end up there. And your competition is no more coming from people around you. The earlier we realize that if we don't train our children to be the best that they can be, as Black people, we will continue to play the second fiddle. And when are we going to understand that somebody going to set up a factory in Nigeria and truly want to run the capitalist system will look for the best graduate? And if that person happens to come elsewhere, they will take it. America is great today because it attracts people from all over the world. Let us just, now America is going through a period as if they're acting against that principle. So let us begin to think that the competition is not between Igbos and Yorubas, or Yorubas and Hausa or Ijaws. It's on a global level. Are your children ready to compete with the best in the world? For me, that is my concern. Are my children and my grandchildren trained well enough to hold up? Or are we producing children as a country that will be hewers of wood and fetchers of water? That is a serious problem that faces us as Black people. And I think that's where I want to do. Let us go beyond this intra-ethnic competition. It's not helping us. We should begin to think about competing on a global level.
All right, thank you so much, Professor Nimi Wariboko, for a wonderful presentation. And like you ended the book by quoting Okendibe, saying that a story that must be told never forgives silence. And I'm happy that you told this story. And I want to encourage everybody to buy the book and read for yourself. You'll be touched, you'll be moved by what some people may not know happened during the war. I thank you so much for joining us, and hopefully next time we call you, you will come back again and be part of that conversation.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you.
Thank you. I almost called you text, but thank you, Nimi Wariboko.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
And we will come back on the other stream where AKJ will host all of you for reactions to what we discussed here today. On behalf of everybody who joined us, those who supported us, Igbo Basic, thank you so much. And we will be back next week. And let me also announce that Dr. Moine will be our guest on the 5th.
Dr. Rudolph, can you please post the link? Because last week I tried, I could not get the link.
All right. You can write me. I'll post it. Thank you so much for joining us. And on the 25th, we are going to have Dr. Moene. He will continue our conversation on Biafra and memories. Thank you, everybody.
Tó fẹ́ kú torí ẹ̀. Ọwọ́ ẹni ló ti ṣàánú kọ́. Ayé la bá, ayé la fi sílẹ̀ sí. Ọ̀nà èyí yóò.
Okudilio, nyekelanio. Olisamalugo mkoyene menenua. Okudilio, nyekelanio. Chukuna malugo yobiadio cha. Agaranya chogo kowe bili, agaranya chogo kowe rienio. Owe chikubezie.
Play, think solid.